Constant comparison. Constantly comparing yourself to others is one of the most common mistakes people make. It happens almost automatically in daily life, whether it's looking at someone else's career, relationships, or even what they post online. The basic idea of comparison is natural. It helps us understand where we stand. But when it becomes constant, it creates problems that are easy to overlook. At its core, comparison measures your own progress against someone else's. You might see a friend buying a new car and think you're falling behind financially, or notice a colleague getting recognition at work and wonder why you haven't. Social media makes this habit even stronger. Seeing curated snapshots of other people's lives gives the impression that everyone else is doing better, even if that picture is incomplete. The issue is that comparison rarely accounts for context. You might be comparing your starting point to someone else's middle, or their highlight reel to your everyday reality. This can lead to frustration, lowered self-confidence, and decisions that don't align with your actual needs. For example, chasing a promotion you don't want, or spending money on things you don't need just to keep up with others. A more useful approach is to compare yourself with your own past progress. Instead of asking how you measure up to someone else, it's more practical to notice whether you've improved from where you were a year ago. That shift changes comparison from a negative cycle into a tool for growth. Constantly comparing yourself is a mistake because it distracts you from your own path and pushes you to measure success with someone else's definition. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward making choices that are actually right for you. Ignoring health until it's too late. Most people will push through a headache, stay up late to finish work, or skip meals because they're busy. In the moment, it feels like a small compromise, nothing serious enough to worry about. But these small choices add up, and when they become routine, they slowly shape long-term health. The body doesn't break down all at once. It adjusts to poor sleep, unhealthy food, or lack of exercise for years before showing clear signs. A person might sit for long hours every day, rely on packaged meals, or ignore stress, and for a while, it seems manageable. Then suddenly, the problems appear. Constant fatigue, weight gain, or chronic pain that doesn't go away as easily as it once did. What looked like minor habits reveal themselves as the foundation of illness. The challenge is that prevention never feels urgent, while treatment always does. It's easier to ignore a warning sign than to make consistent lifestyle changes, but that delay often turns into larger consequences. For example, someone who avoids routine checkups might discover an advanced condition that could have been treated earlier with far less effort. Health influences more than the body. Poor sleep impacts focus at work, and stress spills into personal relationships. Small habits like staying active, eating balanced meals, and scheduling regular checkups make daily life easier and create a safety net for the future. The mistake many people make is waiting until their health forces them to act, instead of taking small preventive steps when it's still easy to do so. Treating work as your only identity, spending long hours at work, checking emails late at night, or tying self-worth entirely to career performance are common patterns in modern life. Over time, this can lead to the mistake of treating work as the only identity you have. Work provides structure, income, and a sense of achievement, but when it becomes the sole measure of value, the rest of life begins to narrow. Relationships, health, hobbies, and personal growth are gradually pushed aside. A person might decline social plans because they feel too busy, skip exercise to meet deadlines, or avoid learning new skills outside their field because they see little relevance beyond the job. The problem is not dedication itself, but imbalance. Jobs can change, companies restructure, and careers shift in ways outside personal control. When identity is built only around work, these changes feel devastating because there is nothing else to fall back on. Even success can feel hollow if it comes at the cost of personal connections or a sense of fulfillment outside the office. Examples are easy to find. Someone may achieve a promotion but realize they've lost touch with friends. Another may retire after decades of focus on work and struggle to adjust without the structure and recognition their career once provided. In both cases, life outside of work feels underdeveloped. A healthier approach is to view work as one part of identity rather than the whole. Maintaining friendships, engaging in hobbies, and caring for physical and mental health provide balance. These areas create resilience so that when work shifts, a person still has other sources of meaning and stability. Treating work as your only identity is a mistake because it limits life to a single role and leaves everything else underdeveloped. Chasing money without learning how to manage it. Many people work hard to earn more money, but few take the time to learn how to manage it. At first, the focus is on increasing income, but income alone doesn't guarantee stability or security. Without a plan, even a higher salary can disappear quickly. The pattern often looks the same. A person gets a raise or a better job, then upgrades their lifestyle to match. A bigger paycheck leads to a new car, frequent dining out, or unnecessary purchases. Bills increase, but savings do not. When an emergency arrives, there is little to fall back on. Despite earning more, the stress of living paycheck to paycheck remains. The core issue is financial literacy, the basic understanding of budgeting, saving, and investing. It's not taught in most schools, so people often learn through trial and error. Some avoid budgeting because it feels restrictive, while others assume that simply earning more will solve financial problems. But money without management often creates the same cycle of debt and anxiety at every income level. Practical management is straightforward. Tracking expenses shows where money is really going. Setting aside a portion for emergencies creates a buffer against unexpected events. Planning for long-term goals like retirement ensures that years of work build into security rather than uncertainty. Even simple habits, such as paying off high-interest debt first or automating savings, make a measurable difference. Chasing money without learning how to manage it is a mistake because it creates the illusion of progress while leaving the underlying problems untouched. Financial security comes less from how much is earned and more from how well it is managed. Treating rest and leisure as wasted time instead of recovery. Many people feel guilty when they take a break, as if rest is something earned only after complete exhaustion. This mindset frames leisure as wasted time, when in reality, it is an essential part of recovery. Rest is not separate from productivity. It is what allows productivity to happen. Just like a phone battery, the human body and mind run down with continuous use. Without recharging, focus weakens, mistakes increase, and motivation slips. Sleep is the most obvious example. Skipping proper rest might create extra hours in the short term, but those hours are often filled with slower work and lower quality results. Leisure plays a similar role. Doing something enjoyable, watching a show, walking outside, or meeting a friend is not simply indulgence. It gives the brain space to reset and reorganize information. Studies on learning show that downtime helps people retain knowledge more effectively than non-stop effort. This is why long study sessions broken up by breaks often outperform hours of uninterrupted work. Physical health also depends on recovery. Muscles grow stronger after rest, not during the workout itself. Ignoring this principle leads to injury instead of improvement. The same pattern holds true for mental stamina. Constantly pushing without recovery leads to burnout, where motivation disappears altogether. In daily life, the effects are easy to spot. Someone who takes regular breaks at work usually returns with more energy and clearer focus, while the person who refuses to pause often ends the day drained and less effective. Rest and leisure are not obstacles to progress, but necessary steps in sustaining it. Treating them as recovery rather than wasted time makes it possible to perform better, stay healthier, and maintain long-term consistency in both work and personal life. Letting perfectionism stop progress. It's common to delay finishing something because it doesn't feel perfect yet. A task is started, small details are adjusted over and over, and progress slows until the work is stuck in a cycle of endless revision. This is what happens when perfectionism stops progress, a mistake that turns the desire to do something well into the reason it never gets done. Perfectionism often begins with good intentions. Wanting a project, assignment, or personal goal to be high quality is reasonable. The problem appears when the focus shifts from making steady progress to avoiding any flaw at all. For example, a student writing an essay may spend hours rewriting the introduction, leaving no time to complete the rest. At work, a presentation might be endlessly tweaked for design instead of being shared on time. In everyday life, even simple tasks like organizing a room or starting a fitness routine can stall because every detail must feel ideal before moving forward. The cost of this habit is that momentum disappears. Deadlines are missed, opportunities are passed up, and projects remain unfinished. Over time, this creates frustration and lowers confidence as people see effort poured in without visible results. Progress, even when imperfect, is what allows skills to grow and improvements to build naturally. By waiting for flawless conditions, the chance to learn through action is lost. One practical way to counter this is to set clear limits, deciding in advance how much time or how many revisions something will receive forces forward movement. Another is to focus on completion first, then refine later once the foundation is in place. These small shifts help separate quality from perfection and keep projects moving. Perfectionism feels productive, but when it blocks progress, it becomes one of the most effective ways to prevent real achievement. Overcommitting to others while neglecting yourself. Saying yes too often is a habit many people develop without realizing how much it affects them. It may start with small favors, like agreeing to cover a shift, helping with a project, or running errands for someone else. Each request on its own feels manageable, but together they begin to crowd out the time and energy needed for personal responsibilities and well-being. Overcommitting usually comes from good intentions. People want to be reliable, supportive, and liked. But when commitments pile up, the cost is often hidden. Sleep gets cut short, meals become rushed, or personal goals are pushed aside. For example, someone may agree to help a colleague after work and then cancel their own gym session, or they might spend a weekend assisting with family tasks while leaving no time to rest or prepare for the week ahead. Over time, this creates a pattern where other people's needs consistently take priority over one's own. The issue is not helping others, but neglecting balance. A person who never sets boundaries risks burnout. They may feel resentful even as they continue to say yes, or they may start dropping commitments altogether because the load has become unmanageable. This affects both personal health and the quality of support they can actually provide. Being stretched too thin often leads to doing things half-heartedly or with unnecessary stress. Protecting time for yourself is not selfish. It allows you to handle your own needs so that when you do help others, you are doing so with energy and focus. Simple steps, like pausing before agreeing, checking your schedule, or setting limits on how much you take on, can prevent this mistake from building. Neglecting yourself while constantly overcommitting to others is a mistake that gradually reduces both personal well-being and genuine effectiveness in supporting others. Ignoring the role of luck. Everyday life is filled with effort, planning, and decision-making, but luck plays a larger role than most people like to admit. Ignoring the influence of chance is a common mistake because it leads to the belief that outcomes are entirely the result of personal skill or effort. While preparation and discipline matter, luck often determines whether those qualities pay off at the right moment. Consider two equally qualified job applicants. Both have strong resumes, similar experience, and good interviews. One receives the offer simply because they happened to apply on the day a position opened, or because a hiring manager related to a detail in their background. That does not erase their effort, but timing and circumstance, both outside their control, played a decisive role. Luck also appears in everyday experiences. The city you were born in, the family you grow up with, or even the teacher assigned to you in school can change the trajectory of your opportunities. A student encouraged by one teacher might pursue a subject they never considered, while another student with equal ability might not get that push. These are random factors that shape long-term outcomes. Acknowledging luck does not mean dismissing hard work. It means understanding that success is usually a mix of preparation and chance. People who underestimate luck often take full credit for their achievements, while unfairly blaming others for struggling. This view can create unrealistic expectations and lead to frustration when things do not work out despite effort. Recognizing the role of luck allows for more realistic planning, greater humility, and more empathy toward others. It encourages you to focus on what can be controlled, while staying aware that chance events always play a part in shaping results. Holding grudges for too long. Resentment can linger long after the original problem has passed. Holding grudges often feels justified in the moment, but over time, it becomes a burden that affects more than the relationship itself. A grudge starts when someone feels wronged. Maybe a friend cancelled plans at the last minute, a coworker took credit for an idea, or a family member made a hurtful remark. Instead of addressing the issue directly, the frustration is stored away. At first, it seems harmless, but as days and weeks pass, the unresolved feeling grows heavier. What was once a single event becomes a filter through which all future interactions are judged. In daily life, this shows up in small but constant ways. Avoiding someone at work, feeling tension during family gatherings, or replaying an argument over and over in your head are all signs of a grudge being carried. These reactions consume mental energy and extend the impact of the original conflict far longer than necessary. The mistake lies in underestimating how much this prolonged resentment takes from the person holding it. Stress increases, interactions become more strained, and opportunities for repair shrink the longer the silence continues. Meanwhile, the other person may have moved on entirely, leaving only one side weighed down by the memory. Letting go of grudges does not mean excusing harmful behavior. It means choosing not to let a single event shape future experiences more than it needs to. Addressing issues directly, setting boundaries, or simply deciding not to dwell on them are healthier responses than carrying the weight indefinitely. The longer a grudge is held, the more it controls the person carrying it. which is why learning to release it is an important step in protecting personal well-being. Believing you'll have unlimited time. Everyday life makes it easy to assume there will always be more time. Tasks get postponed, goals are delayed, and important conversations are pushed aside with the idea that they can be handled later. The mistake lies in believing that time is endless, when in reality, it is one of the most limited resources people have. At first, this belief shows up in small ways. Someone might delay learning a skill they care about, assuming they can start next month. A family member might be put off with the idea that there will be another chance to visit soon. Even health can be neglected under the assumption that there is plenty of time to change habits later. Each decision seems harmless in the moment, but they add up over the years. The reality is that time moves in one direction. Lost hours, days, or years cannot be regained. For example, a person who always tells themselves they'll eventually exercise may find that their body no longer responds the way it once did. A parent who plans to spend more time with their child later may discover that the child has already grown into independence. These shifts happen quietly, and by the time they are noticed, the chance to act may have already passed. Recognizing the limits of time is not about pressure, but about perspective. Choosing to act now on the things that matter, whether that means addressing health, maintaining relationships, or pursuing long-term goals, prevents regret later. Everyday decisions like setting aside 1 hour to call someone important or finally starting a project reflect an understanding that time is not unlimited. The real mistake is living as though there will always be another chance, when in truth, time is finite. Believing you're too old to start something new. It's common for people to reach a certain age and feel that new opportunities have passed them by. The idea that you are too old to begin something different is a mistake that quietly closes doors long before they need to be shut. Age does change the way we approach challenges, but it doesn't prevent growth, skill building, or achievement unless we allow it to. Many adults avoid picking up hobbies or skills they once dreamed about because they believe those things belong to a younger stage of life. Someone in their 40s might dismiss the thought of learning guitar, assuming it's only practical for teenagers. Another person in their 50s may want to return to school, but tell themselves it's unrealistic. These beliefs don't reflect ability so much as perception. Starting later may require different pacing and adjustments, but it still allows progress and satisfaction. In many cases, starting something new later in life actually brings advantages. Older learners often have more patience, clearer goals, and better discipline than when they were younger. A person who decides to take up painting in midlife, for example, can draw on years of observation and focus, creating a different quality of work than they might have as a beginner in their teens. Similarly, a career change or new business venture may succeed because of accumulated experience rather than in spite of it. The belief that age is a barrier usually grows from comparisons to others or cultural expectations about what stages of life should look like. But in reality, many people achieve meaningful accomplishments well beyond what is considered the right time. Believing you're too old to start something new is a mistake because it stops progress before it has the chance to begin. Relying on motivation instead of discipline. Waking up early to exercise, finishing a project on time, or sticking to a new habit often feels easy on the days when you're motivated. But motivation is unpredictable, and relying on it alone can quickly turn into a mistake. Discipline, unlike motivation, is about structure and consistency. It keeps you moving even when you don't feel like it. Motivation tends to spike in short bursts, like when you hear an inspiring story or set a new goal. For example, someone might buy fresh running shoes and feel energized to jog every morning. Yet, as soon as the weather turns cold or work gets busy, that motivation fades. If there's no system or discipline in place, the habit disappears with it. Discipline, on the other hand, creates a framework that doesn't depend on mood or circumstance. It's the act of showing up, even when it's inconvenient. Think about brushing your teeth. Most people don't do it because they're motivated each night. They do it because it's a set routine. That same principle applies to building skills, maintaining health, or reaching career milestones. Small daily actions, repeated regardless of how inspired you feel, add up to long-term results. Another common example is studying or working toward a professional goal. Waiting for motivation often leads to procrastination, while disciplined scheduling, like blocking time each evening to focus, makes progress inevitable. The difference is that motivation feels good but is fleeting, while discipline is often uncomfortable at first but produces lasting outcomes. The mistake of relying on motivation instead of discipline lies in expecting energy and enthusiasm to carry you through challenges. Building discipline ensures that effort continues, even when motivation is absent, which makes consistency and real progress possible. Taking sleep for granted, staying up late to finish work, scrolling through your phone in bed, or cutting back on sleep to make more time in the day feels harmless. In reality, these small choices add up, and sleep is often treated as optional when it is one of the most important foundations of health. Sleep is not simply rest. During the night, the body repairs tissues, the brain processes information, and energy levels are reset for the next day. Skipping these cycles weakens focus, slows reaction times, and makes decision-making harder. A person who consistently sleeps 5 or 6 hours instead of 7 or 8 may notice more irritability, weaker memory, or constant fatigue, even if they don't link these problems directly to lack of sleep. Over time, the effects become more serious. Chronic sleep deprivation increases the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. It also weakens the immune system, making it harder to fight infections. For many people, the signs appear gradually: morning grogginess, reliance on caffeine, or trouble staying alert through the day. These are often dismissed as normal, but they are early warnings of an ongoing problem. Prioritizing sleep does not require drastic changes. Simple adjustments such as keeping a consistent bedtime, limiting screen use before bed, and creating a dark, quiet environment make it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. Even an extra hour of rest each night improves mood, focus, and long-term health. Taking sleep for granted is a mistake because it undermines both daily performance and future well-being, turning what should be a natural advantage into an unnecessary struggle. Letting pride stop you from asking for help, struggling with a task, feeling overwhelmed, or facing a problem alone often comes from the belief that asking for help is a sign of weakness. Pride can make people push through on their own, even when support is available, and would make the situation easier. At its core, pride in independence is not harmful. It motivates self-reliance and persistence. But when it prevents someone from reaching out, it turns into a barrier. A student might avoid asking a teacher to clarify a concept and fall further behind. An employee may refuse to seek guidance from a colleague and waste days solving a problem that could have been resolved in an hour. In personal life, someone might hide financial or emotional struggles from friends or family, fearing judgment, only to face greater consequences later. The cost of not asking for help is often more time, more stress, and sometimes unnecessary failure. Everyone has limits, and collaboration is what allows people to overcome them. A different perspective, an extra set of hands, or the experience of someone who has already solved the problem can prevent small challenges from turning into major setbacks. Cultural pressure also plays a role. Many societies reward self-sufficiency and celebrate people who appear to manage everything alone. But in practice, success in nearly every field is built on networks of cooperation, mentorship, and shared knowledge. Acknowledging that reality makes asking for help less about weakness and more about efficiency. Letting pride stop you from asking for help is a mistake because it creates unnecessary obstacles and prevents people from using the resources and support already around them. Staying in relationships long after they've turned toxic. Arguments that never get resolved, constant tension, or the feeling of walking on eggshells are signs that a relationship has shifted from supportive to harmful. When this becomes the norm, staying in it too long can slowly damage mental and emotional health. A toxic relationship is not defined by a single bad day. It develops when negative patterns repeat. Constant criticism, manipulation, lack of trust, or withdrawal of affection. Instead of feeling safe and valued, one or both people feel drained and diminished over time. People often remain in these relationships for reasons that make sense in the moment. Some worry about the years they've already invested. Others fear loneliness, and practical concerns like shared housing or finances create barriers to leaving. The result is that harmful dynamics continue, even when both parties recognize the situation is unhealthy. The cost of staying too long is more than emotional discomfort. Prolonged stress from constant conflict can lead to anxiety, disrupted sleep, and even physical health problems. It can also hold someone back from growth, as energy is consumed by managing tension instead of building a better future. Recognizing when a relationship has crossed into toxic territory requires stepping back and honestly assessing its impact. Setting boundaries, seeking outside perspectives, or deciding to walk away are all healthier than enduring an environment that consistently harms well-being. Remaining in relationships long after they've turned toxic is a mistake because it trades stability for harm, preventing people from moving on to healthier connections. Neglecting friendships when life gets busy. Work deadlines, family responsibilities, and everyday tasks often take priority, and friendships are the first thing to be set aside. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, it's skipping a call, postponing a plan, or assuming you'll reconnect later. Over time, those small delays can turn into years of distance. Friendships are unique because they don't demand constant attention to survive, but they do require consistent effort to stay strong. A quick message, sharing a meal, or showing up during important moments keeps the connection alive. Without that effort, even close friends begin to feel like acquaintances. When life is busy, it's easy to treat friendships as optional, but the cost of neglect is often realized only when support is needed and the bond has weakened. The impact goes beyond losing social contact. Strong friendships provide emotional balance, help reduce stress, and create a sense of belonging that work and family alone can't replace. Neglecting these relationships can increase feelings of isolation, even when surrounded by people every day. For example, someone may have a busy career and a family at home, but still feel disconnected because they no longer maintain friendships outside those circles. Maintaining friendships doesn't require large amounts of time. Simple habits, such as checking in regularly, setting aside a few hours each month to meet, or remembering important events can preserve bonds for decades. These small actions accumulate into trust and closeness that remain valuable throughout life. Neglecting friendships when life gets busy is a mistake because it quietly erodes one of the most reliable sources of support and joy, leaving people without connections that could have been sustained with consistent care. Hiding emotions instead of expressing them. Holding back emotions often feels like the safest option. People stay quiet about frustration, hide sadness, or suppress anger because they don't want to burden others or appear vulnerable. While it can seem like control in the moment, consistently hiding emotions creates long-term costs. Emotions are signals. They communicate needs, boundaries, and reactions both to ourselves and to others. When ignored or hidden, those signals don't disappear. They build up. Someone who never admits stress at work may eventually burn out. A person who avoids expressing hurt in a relationship may grow resentful, allowing distance to develop. In both cases, unspoken emotions turn into larger problems because they were never addressed directly. The habit of hiding feelings often comes from cultural expectations, family patterns, or fear of judgment. Children might grow up hearing that showing emotions is a weakness and carry that lesson into adulthood. In professional settings, people may worry that honesty about pressure or mistakes will be seen as incompetence. Over time, bottling up feelings can lead to anxiety, depression, or sudden emotional outbursts when the pressure becomes too much. Expressing emotions doesn't mean losing control or sharing everything. It means communicating clearly in ways that allow others to understand what's going on. This can be as simple as telling a friend you're having a hard day, letting a partner know when something bothers you, or admitting to a manager that a project requires support. These small expressions build trust and prevent misunderstandings. Hiding emotions instead of expressing them is a mistake because it blocks healthy communication and creates unnecessary stress that often grows worse over time. Believing failure is permanent. Everyone experiences failure at some point, whether it's a poor grade, a rejected application, or a project that doesn't go as planned. The mistake comes from treating those failures as permanent rather than as part of a process that can eventually lead to improvement. Failure feels final because the immediate impact is uncomfortable. Losing a job or being turned down for an opportunity can affect confidence and create the sense that progress has stopped altogether. For many people, this feeling lingers and shapes the decisions they make afterward. Instead of trying again, they avoid similar risks, assuming the outcome will always be the same. The problem is that most success is built on repeated attempts. A student who fails an exam can still pass the course by adjusting study methods. A business owner who launches a product that doesn't sell can use the lessons from that experience to refine the next one. Even in personal life, failed relationships or missteps in communication often provide the clarity needed to do better in the future. Treating failure as permanent blocks the opportunity to learn and adapt from those experiences. The practical difference between people who recover from failure and those who don't often comes down to perspective. Viewing setbacks as information rather than proof of inadequacy allows for growth. This doesn't mean ignoring mistakes, but recognizing that the outcome of one attempt does not define the outcome of all future ones. Believing failure is permanent is a mistake because it turns temporary setbacks into lasting barriers, limiting progress that could have come from persistence and adaptation. Trying to please everyone, agreeing to requests you don't have time for, avoiding disagreement to keep the peace, or constantly adjusting your behavior to meet others' expectations are all signs of trying to please everyone. While it may reduce tension in the moment, this habit often creates more problems than it solves. The desire to please comes from wanting to be liked and accepted. It can feel easier to say yes than to risk disappointing someone. At work, this might mean taking on tasks outside your role, even when your own workload is already full. In friendships, it can look like always going along with plans you don't enjoy. Over time, these choices lead to stress, exhaustion, and a loss of personal boundaries. The issue is that no one can meet every expectation. When people spread themselves too thin, the quality of their commitments drops. A person who tries to keep everyone happy may miss deadlines, forget promises, or feel resentment toward those they are trying to accommodate. Ironically, the effort to please everyone often results in letting more people down. Learning to set limits is a practical solution. Saying no when necessary, being clear about priorities, and accepting that not everyone will agree are ways to maintain balance. People usually respect honesty, and those who don't are less likely to value genuine relationships in the first place. Trying to please everyone is a mistake because it sacrifices personal well-being and effectiveness in an impossible attempt to satisfy everyone's expectations. Overthinking small decisions. Spending too much time choosing what to wear, debating what to eat, or worrying about minor details can feel harmless. But overthinking small decisions quickly adds unnecessary stress to daily life. What should take a few minutes can turn into hours of hesitation and second-guessing. At its core, overthinking is the fear of making the wrong choice, even when the stakes are low. A person may scroll through endless restaurant options before meeting friends, delaying plans that could have started earlier. Another may spend days tweaking a minor detail of a project instead of moving forward. While the intent is to make the best possible decision, the result is usually wasted time, drained energy, and added frustration. The problem is magnified because mental energy is limited. When too much focus is placed on small choices, there is less capacity left for decisions that truly matter. This is why some people adopt routines or simplify options, such as preparing meals in advance or sticking to a set morning routine. Reducing the number of trivial decisions frees up attention for work, relationships, and long-term goals. Overthinking also prevents progress. Even if the choice is eventually made, the constant back and forth delays action. In many cases, the outcome of a small decision has little long-term impact. But the habit of overanalyzing creates stress that compounds over time. Recognizing which decisions are low stakes and moving through them quickly is a practical way to prevent decision fatigue. Overthinking small decisions is a mistake because it consumes time and energy that could be better used for choices with real significance. Not taking risks when you had less to lose, turning down opportunities because they feel uncertain is a common choice, but avoiding risks when the stakes are low often leads to missed chances for growth. The early stages of life or career are usually the most flexible, yet many people hesitate to take action because they fear failure. Risk is often seen as something to avoid, but not all risks are equal. Trying a new field of study, starting a small business, or moving to a different city while young carries fewer long-term consequences than doing so later in life. At a time when responsibilities are lighter and the cost of failure is smaller, these choices can provide valuable experience and open doors to opportunities that would otherwise remain closed. The problem arises when fear of embarrassment or short-term loss outweighs the potential benefits. Someone might stay in a familiar but unfulfilling job instead of exploring a new role, or decline to travel or pursue education abroad because it feels uncertain. These decisions create safety in the moment, but limit what can be learned and achieved in the long run. As people get older, responsibilities such as family, financial commitments, and health make it harder to take bold steps. The risks feel heavier, and opportunities are often evaluated more cautiously. Looking back, many regret not taking risks earlier when they had the flexibility to recover from setbacks. Taking risks does not mean acting recklessly. It means recognizing when the potential gains outweigh the limited downsides and using periods of greater freedom to experiment, learn, and grow. Not taking risks when you had less to lose is a mistake because it wastes opportunities that are hardest to recover later in life. Spending years in jobs you secretly hate, dragging yourself out of bed every morning to go to a job you dislike, is an experience many people know well. What often begins as a temporary compromise can quietly turn into years spent in work that feels draining and unfulfilling. There are practical reasons people stay in jobs they hate. A steady paycheck, benefits, or the fear of unemployment make it difficult to leave. Over time, routine takes over, and the thought of making a change feels overwhelming. This leads to a situation where someone continues showing up each day, even though the work provides little satisfaction or growth. The impact extends beyond the workplace. Spending 8 or more hours a day in an environment that feels negative affects mood, energy, and relationships outside of work. People may come home exhausted, disengaged, or irritable, leaving less time and energy for family, hobbies, or personal goals. Over years, this can create a sense of being stuck, with life revolving around obligations rather than choices. Remaining in an unfulfilling job also limits opportunities for progress. Skills may stagnate, confidence can decrease, and the longer someone stays, the harder it becomes to imagine alternatives. In contrast, even small steps toward exploring new fields, training, or side projects can gradually open doors to better options. Work will always involve challenges, but when dissatisfaction is constant, it signals a deeper issue. Staying for years in jobs you secretly hate is a mistake because it trades long-term fulfillment for short-term security, leaving potential unexplored and daily life weighed down by dissatisfaction. Forgetting to appreciate parents until they're gone. Daily routines often make it easy to take parents for granted. Conversations become short, visits are delayed, and the focus shifts to work, friends, or personal goals. Over time, this creates distance, and appreciation is expressed less often than it should be. Parents usually provide consistent support in ways that blend into the background. They offer guidance, handle responsibilities, or simply check in, and because it happens regularly, it can be overlooked. Many people assume this support will always be there, forgetting that time is limited and relationships don't last forever. The regret becomes clear when it's too late to express gratitude directly. People often look back wishing they had made more calls, asked more questions, or said thank you more often. Small acts of acknowledgement, such as sharing a meal, listening to their stories, or showing interest in their daily lives, make a big difference, but are frequently postponed in the rush of everyday obligations. Appreciation doesn't require grand gestures. Simple recognition, respect for their efforts, and spending time together create meaningful memories. These actions also strengthen the bond between generations, allowing parents to feel valued while giving children a clearer sense of connection and identity. When parents are no longer around, the absence highlights how much they contributed. What once felt ordinary is remembered as irreplaceable, and the chance to show appreciation is gone. Forgetting to appreciate parents until they're gone is a mistake because it overlooks one of the most important relationships in life while there is still time to nurture it. Not setting boundaries, agreeing to tasks you don't have time for, answering messages late at night, or tolerating behavior that makes you uncomfortable are all signs of weak or missing boundaries. While it may seem easier to go along with requests, failing to set clear limits often leads to stress, resentment, and strained relationships. Boundaries define what is acceptable and what isn't in how others interact with you. Without them, people may unintentionally take more time, energy, or resources than you can give. At work, this can mean consistently taking on extra projects because you never say no. In personal life, it might mean letting friends or family make demands that disrupt your priorities. Over time, the absence of boundaries reduces your ability to focus on what truly matters. The reluctance to set boundaries usually comes from a fear of disappointing others or appearing unkind. However, boundaries are not about pushing people away. They provide structure that makes relationships healthier. For example, letting co-workers know you are unavailable after certain hours helps protect personal time while still allowing you to contribute effectively during the day. In friendships, being honest about your limits prevents silent frustration that could damage the relationship later. Clear boundaries also communicate respect. They show others how you expect to be treated, and in turn, encourage them to share their own limits. This creates a balance where both sides know what to expect and misunderstandings are reduced. Not setting boundaries is a mistake because it sacrifices personal well-being and creates patterns that are difficult to maintain over time. Letting screens replace real experiences. Checking phones during meals, scrolling through feeds before bed, or spending hours on streaming platforms are now routine parts of daily life. While screens provide convenience and entertainment, allowing them to replace real experiences is a mistake that gradually reduces the richness of everyday living. Screens are not inherently harmful. They make communication faster, bring information instantly, and connect people across distances. The problem arises when digital interaction becomes the default, pushing face-to-face connections and physical activities into the background. For example, messaging a friend is easier than visiting them in person, but it lacks the depth of shared experiences like eating together or spending time outdoors. The effects show up in small ways. A family sitting in the same room might each be absorbed in their own devices, speaking less and sharing fewer moments. A person may watch travel videos online, but never set aside time to explore their own city. Even celebrations can feel incomplete when people focus more on recording them than on being present. Over time, this shift creates consequences for mental health, relationships, and memory. Real experiences, conversations, physical activity, or time in nature provide variety and depth that screens cannot replicate. These interactions strengthen bonds, reduce stress, and create lasting memories that are far more impactful than digital content. Finding balance does not mean abandoning technology. It means making intentional choices about when to put devices aside. Small steps, like eating meals without screens, setting limits on recreational scrolling, or dedicating time to in-person activities, help restore that balance. Letting screens replace real experiences is a mistake because it trades meaningful connections and memories for convenience and distraction. Not traveling when you had the chance. Postponing travel is one of the most common choices people make. Work commitments, financial worries, or the belief that there will always be time later often push the idea of traveling into the background. The mistake comes when those opportunities never return. Travel is more than visiting new places. It provides perspective, breaks routine, and creates experiences that can't be replicated through screens or stories. Meeting people from different cultures, trying unfamiliar food, or exploring new environments adds variety and depth to life. These experiences often influence how people think, work, and relate to others. Delaying travel feels practical in the moment. A person may decide to wait until they earn more money, get more time off, or feel more settled. While those reasons are understandable, they create a cycle where travel is always planned for later. As responsibilities increase, such as raising a family, advancing in a career, or managing health concerns, the window for spontaneous trips becomes smaller. The regret surfaces when people look back and realize they had chances earlier in life that were easier to take. For example, a student may pass on a study abroad program, or a young professional may skip a trip with friends, assuming another opportunity will come. Years later, those moments can feel like missed experiences that cannot be recreated. Travel does not always need to be expensive or far. Exploring nearby cities, taking short trips, or visiting local cultural sites still provide the benefits of breaking routine and experiencing something new. The value comes from choosing to go rather than continually delaying. Not traveling when you had the chance is a mistake because it allows time and responsibilities to close doors that could have led to lasting memories and broader perspective. Trusting people blindly without learning discernment. Believing what someone says without questioning. Sharing personal details too quickly, or relying on others before understanding their intentions are all examples of blind trust. While trust is essential for healthy relationships, giving it without discernment often leads to disappointment or harm. Trust forms the foundation of cooperation. It allows people to work together, build friendships, and feel supported. The problem comes when trust is given automatically, without observing whether the other person has earned it. This can create situations where individuals take advantage of kindness, manipulate emotions, or misuse information. Examples are easy to find in daily life. Someone may loan money to a new acquaintance who never pays it back, or share private struggles with a colleague who later uses that information against them. In professional settings, placing complete confidence in a partner without verifying their reliability can result in broken agreements or financial loss. Discernment is the skill that balances trust with caution. It means paying attention to consistency, noticing whether actions match words, and allowing trust to build gradually through experience. For instance, trusting a coworker after they repeatedly follow through on commitments is different from trusting someone immediately based on promises alone. Learning discernment doesn't mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It means recognizing patterns, setting boundaries, and adjusting expectations based on behavior rather than appearances. This approach still allows meaningful relationships to grow, but reduces the likelihood of being misled or hurt. Trusting people blindly without learning discernment is a mistake because it exposes you to unnecessary risks and prevents you from building relationships on a foundation of reliability and respect. Losing curiosity as you grow older. Curiosity is a natural driver of learning. Children constantly experiment, ask how things work, and test boundaries. This curiosity helps them adapt quickly and gain knowledge without even realizing it. Over time, adults often trade that sense of discovery for efficiency. Tasks are completed the same way because it feels easier, and new topics are avoided because they seem unnecessary or intimidating. The impact shows up in everyday life. Someone might use the same features on their phone for years without exploring updates that could make life easier. At work, employees who stop being curious about new methods or tools can fall behind as industries evolve. Even in conversations, losing curiosity can make interactions shallow, as people focus only on sharing their own opinions instead of asking meaningful questions about others. Maintaining curiosity does not require major effort. It can be as simple as trying a new recipe instead of repeating the same meals, reading about a subject outside your usual interests, or asking a colleague why they approach a problem differently. These small actions keep the mind flexible and open to change. The danger of losing curiosity is that it gradually limits growth. Without it, skills stagnate, opportunities shrink, and life becomes narrower than it needs to be. Staying curious allows people to keep learning, stay adaptable, and remain engaged with the world around them. Believing money automatically buys happiness. Having more money makes daily life easier, but it does not guarantee lasting happiness. Many people assume that once they reach a certain income or savings level, their problems will disappear and life will feel complete. In reality, money solves some challenges, but cannot address every aspect of well-being. On a practical level, money provides security. It helps cover rent, groceries, medical bills, and other essentials. This stability does reduce stress, especially for those struggling to make ends meet. However, once basic needs and a modest level of comfort are met, the link between money and happiness becomes weaker. A larger paycheck can upgrade a car or a home, but those changes quickly become part of the routine and lose their initial excitement. The mistake lies in believing that wealth alone brings fulfillment. For example, someone who spends long hours at work to earn more may have less time for family, friends, or personal health. Another person may buy expensive items to feel satisfied, only to find the feeling fades within weeks. These patterns highlight that happiness depends on more than financial resources. Research and everyday observation both show that meaningful relationships, a sense of purpose, and good health play a larger role in long-term happiness. Money can support these areas, such as paying for a gym membership or funding a family trip, but it cannot replace the deeper satisfaction that comes from connection and personal growth. The real value of money is that it acts as a tool. Used wisely, it can remove barriers and open opportunities. Believing that it automatically delivers happiness is a mistake, because happiness relies on choices, priorities, and experiences beyond the financial side of life. Not negotiating your worth. Accepting the first offer without negotiation often means leaving opportunities behind. Many people avoid these conversations out of fear of rejection, discomfort with confrontation, or the belief that hard work alone will eventually be noticed and rewarded. But in workplaces and business settings, value is not only tied to performance, it is also tied to the ability to communicate that value. At its core, negotiation is about aligning what you bring to the table with fair recognition. For example, an employee who consistently delivers strong results may accept a promotion without asking for a pay increase, assuming the company will provide it automatically. Over time, this can create frustration as responsibilities grow while compensation lags behind. Similarly, freelancers who underprice their services to secure clients often find themselves overworked and underpaid because they set an expectation that undervalues their skills. The mistake lies in assuming that silence will be rewarded. In reality, organizations and individuals make decisions based on signals. When you present your achievements clearly and ask for compensation or conditions that reflect them, you set a standard for how others view your contribution. This is not about being aggressive, it is about being clear and confident in the value you provide. Real-world examples show that even small negotiations make a difference. Asking for a slight salary increase, requesting better project terms, or negotiating flexible hours can improve both financial outcomes and quality of life. Those who avoid these discussions often end up doing the same work as others for less recognition or fewer benefits. Failing to negotiate your worth leads to missed opportunities, while learning to advocate for yourself ensures that your effort, time, and skills are acknowledged in a way that matches their true value. Ignoring gut instincts. Everyday choices often come with a subtle feeling that something is either right or wrong. This response, often called gut instinct, is the brain's way of drawing on patterns and experiences faster than conscious reasoning can. Ignoring these signals can lead to decisions that seem logical on the surface, but create problems later. Gut instincts are not random. They form from countless small observations and experiences stored in memory. For example, when meeting someone new, you might feel uneasy even if they appear friendly. That discomfort often comes from noticing subtle cues, tone of voice, body language, or inconsistencies that your conscious mind doesn't process fully. Brushing aside that reaction may leave you vulnerable to misplaced trust or poor judgment. In everyday settings, people often rely only on data, advice, or external validation, assuming that instincts are irrational. A common case is in business negotiations, where a deal may look solid on paper, but something feels off about the partner. Those who ignore that hesitation may face future conflicts that intuition quietly predicted. Similarly, in personal life, choosing to stay in an unhealthy environment despite inner signals can prolong stress and regret. It's important to distinguish instinct from impulse. Impulse is driven by emotion in the moment, while instinct combines experience and subconscious evaluation. Using both rational analysis and gut response leads to more balanced decisions. For instance, if your instinct signals caution, it can guide you to pause, gather more information, and avoid rushing into commitments. The mistake of ignoring gut instincts comes from undervaluing the role they play in decision-making. Recognizing them as an additional source of information, rather than dismissing them, helps people make choices that reflect both their knowledge and their deeper awareness. Not saying no when you needed to. Daily life is filled with requests, expectations, and obligations, and learning when to say no is a skill many people overlook. Failing to set that boundary can lead to commitments that drain time, energy, and focus away from what truly matters. The mistake begins with the desire to be agreeable. At work, this might look like taking on extra tasks when your schedule is already full, simply because you didn't want to disappoint a colleague or a manager. In personal life, it could mean attending events you had no interest in, or agreeing to favors that disrupted your own priorities. In the moment, saying yes feels easier than dealing with potential conflict, but over time, it creates resentment and exhaustion. Not saying no also prevents you from protecting your own goals. Every choice has a cost. Agreeing to work late multiple times might mean missing out on family time or rest. Accepting social plans you didn't want could reduce the time needed for personal projects. The short-term discomfort of refusing often prevents the long-term frustration of living on someone else's terms. Saying no does not mean rejecting people entirely. It simply means recognizing limits and making decisions aligned with your priorities. For example, declining a project at work can still be paired with offering a realistic alternative, like suggesting a timeline that works for you. In personal life, saying no to one invitation does not prevent you from maintaining the relationship. It just ensures your commitments remain balanced. The mistake lies in assuming that always saying yes keeps peace or shows kindness. In reality, it often leaves people stretched too thin, unable to give their best to the responsibilities that matter most. Running from solitude instead of learning it. Spending time alone is a part of life, but many people treat it as something to avoid rather than something to understand. The mistake happens when solitude is seen only as a problem instead of a skill that can be developed. From a young age, it's easy to fill every quiet moment with distractions. Phones, television, or constant social interaction become ways to avoid being by yourself. In adulthood, this habit often continues. Some people plan their schedules so tightly that they never have a moment to sit in silence, while others surround themselves with noise or activity to avoid the discomfort of being alone. The result is a missed opportunity. Solitude, when used intentionally, can provide space for rest and clarity. For example, sitting alone without a screen for even 20 minutes can help someone process their thoughts after a busy day. Going for a walk alone can highlight what's been ignored, like the need to slow down or change direction. Without learning to handle this time, people often rely too heavily on others for validation or distraction. Avoiding solitude also limits independence. A person who cannot enjoy their own company may struggle to make decisions without outside input or feel anxious when left without plans. On the other hand, someone who has learned to sit with themselves is better equipped to handle uncertainty, stress, and change. Everyday tasks, from cooking a meal for one to traveling alone for work, become easier when solitude is not feared. The real mistake is assuming that being alone always signals loneliness. In practice, solitude is a skill, and learning it makes life less overwhelming and more manageable. Choosing short-term pleasure over long-term health, reaching for what feels good in the moment, is easy. Whether it's fast food after a long day, staying up late to keep watching a show, or skipping exercise because it feels uncomfortable, these small choices often provide quick relief. The mistake is when those short-term pleasures are consistently prioritized over long-term health, creating patterns that quietly undermine well-being. At the core, the issue comes down to trade-offs. A sugary snack may provide energy for a few minutes, but repeated daily choices like this increase the risk of weight gain or chronic illness. Choosing the couch instead of a walk may feel restful, but over time it contributes to lower stamina and reduced strength. These actions don't seem harmful in isolation, which is why they're easy to justify. But when they become habits, the long-term costs grow much larger than the short-term rewards. This can be seen in everyday examples. Someone might delay sleep to scroll on their phone, only to feel tired and less focused the next day. Another person might put off routine checkups, convincing themselves it's unnecessary until a minor health issue develops into something more serious. In each case, the immediate comfort feels like a gain, but it comes at the expense of future health. Long-term health depends on consistent investment, often in small ways. Choosing balanced meals, regular physical activity, and proper rest may not bring instant satisfaction, but these actions accumulate benefits that shape the quality of life years ahead. Recognizing this balance is key because ignoring it makes short-term relief far more costly over time. The mistake is letting temporary comfort take priority over long-term health, when the real value lies in choices that protect the body for the future. Not documenting your memories. Memories fade faster than we expect. The small details of daily life, like the exact words someone said, the look of a room, or even the meal shared on a special day, often slip away with time. The mistake comes when these moments are never documented, leaving little to look back on beyond vague impressions. Documenting memories is not about creating perfect records. It's about giving yourself anchors to revisit experiences later. A simple photo, a short video, or even a written note can preserve details that the brain naturally discards. Without these reminders, important parts of personal history gradually blur until they're difficult to recall. This is noticeable in everyday situations. Think of a family gathering where no one takes a picture. At the time, it feels unnecessary because the moment is so vivid. But a few years later, without a record, the memory is harder to reconstruct. Or consider someone who travels but never keeps a journal or takes photos. They may recall the general trip, but the specific streets walked, foods tried, or conversations had become lost. Technology has made documentation easier than ever. Phones allow instant photos, voice recordings, and notes that can be stored indefinitely. Even a quick snapshot of an event or a short journal entry at the end of the day can capture the essence of an experience. Over time, these small records form a personal archive that becomes far more valuable than it seemed in the moment. Failing to document memories means relying solely on imperfect recall, which guarantees that many experiences will fade. The wiser choice is to record them, even in simple ways, so the details remain available to revisit in the future. Forgetting to laugh at yourself. Small mistakes happen daily. Misplacing keys, spilling coffee, mixing up a name in a meeting. When these moments feel serious, it's easy to tighten up and defend your image. Forgetting to laugh at yourself turns small errors into stress, and stress into overreactions. Laughing at yourself isn't about dismissing responsibility. It's a way to show that you can see the situation clearly and move on. A quick, light acknowledgement lowers tension for you and for others. It keeps the focus on fixing the problem instead of protecting your pride. You can see the difference in ordinary scenes. A slide fails during a presentation. One person freezes and apologizes repeatedly, while another smiles, says they'll continue without it, and delivers the key points. Dinner burns and fills the kitchen with smoke. One person blames the stove, another opens a window, jokes about extra crispy, and orders takeout. A wrong turn adds 10 minutes to a trip. One driver stews, the other treats it as a brief detour and adjusts. In each case, the second response keeps momentum and preserves the mood. Without this skill, minor issues feel like threats to identity. People become rigid, take feedback personally, and make tense moments longer than they need to be. Relationships also suffer, because friends and co-workers read defensiveness as distance, while light self-humor signals safety and openness. The habit is learnable. Name the mistake without drama. Smile or shrug and move on. Share the story later as a lesson rather than a complaint. Separate your value from the outcome of a single moment. Set a personal grace rule that allows a redo when stakes are low. Using light self-humor turns everyday errors into information you can act on instead of problems you need to hide. It keeps small mistakes from derailing the entire day. Always waiting for perfect conditions. Waking up with a new goal in mind often comes with the thought of waiting for the right time to begin. People tell themselves they'll start when work slows down, when they have more money, or when they finally feel ready. This is the habit of waiting for perfect conditions, and it quietly stops progress before it even begins. The reality is that ideal conditions rarely appear. Life is full of competing responsibilities, interruptions, and uncertainties. By delaying action until every piece falls into place, people unintentionally push their goals further away. For example, someone who wants to get fit might spend months waiting until they can afford the best gym or the right pair of shoes, when in truth, even a short daily walk would move them forward. This mistake often comes from a belief that starting small or imperfectly isn't good enough. People assume that progress only counts if it's backed by the best tools, the best timing, or complete confidence. In practice, Those things develop along the way. A student might wait to write until they feel inspired, but writing a rough draft, however clumsy, is what leads to clarity. A person saving for a future project might delay until they can put away large amounts, when even small, consistent contributions create momentum. By waiting for flawless circumstances, individuals give up the chance to build discipline and resilience. Conditions change, setbacks arrive, and readiness often comes from doing, not from preparing endlessly. The difference between those who make progress and those who stay stuck often comes down to who chooses to begin despite uncertainty. Taking action under less than perfect conditions ensures that progress is made, and that progress builds the very stability and confidence people were waiting for in the first place. Avoiding learning outside your field. You spend years building expertise in one area, and it feels natural to keep your focus there. Specialization is often rewarded, but avoiding learning outside your field can quietly become a limitation. When knowledge is kept in one lane, it narrows perspective and makes problem-solving harder. In most workplaces, challenges are rarely contained to a single area. A designer who never learns about marketing struggles to understand why a campaign works. An engineer who ignores communication skills might have great ideas, but fails to explain them clearly. Even outside of work, life becomes more difficult when skills and knowledge are too narrowly defined. Learning beyond your primary field doesn't mean abandoning focus. It means adding tools that make your main expertise more effective. Think of a teacher who learns basic psychology to better understand how students stay motivated, or a doctor who studies nutrition alongside medicine to offer more practical advice. These extra layers of knowledge don't replace their core skills, they make them stronger. Another risk of staying too narrow is missing opportunities. Many breakthroughs come from combining ideas across fields. Someone in technology who understands art can create more intuitive products. Someone in finance who studies history may see patterns others overlook. When you only read within your comfort zone, you end up recycling the same insights while others are connecting dots across disciplines. A practical way to avoid this mistake is small. Pick up books or courses that seem unrelated to your work, talk to people in different industries, or try hobbies that build new ways of thinking. Each step broadens perspective and adds flexibility. Avoiding learning outside your field restricts growth, while cross-disciplinary learning gives you an advantage in solving problems, adapting, and creating new opportunities. Letting fear of judgment silence you. Speaking up in front of others often feels harder than it should. Whether it's sharing an idea in a meeting, asking a question in class, or simply voicing an opinion in a group conversation, many people hesitate because they're worried about what others might think. This hesitation comes from the fear of judgment, and over time it can become a habit that quietly limits opportunities. At its core, the fear is simple. The possibility of being misunderstood, dismissed, or even laughed at. But the cost of staying quiet is rarely considered. In professional settings, for example, someone might hold back a useful suggestion during a team project, only to watch another person raise the same point later and receive recognition for it. In social settings, avoiding self-expression can leave a person feeling overlooked or disconnected, even when they have something valuable to contribute. The problem is not just about missing individual moments. Over time, silence can create a pattern where others assume you have less to add, which can affect career growth, relationships, and self-confidence. Even in small, everyday scenarios, like not correcting a wrong food order or staying quiet when a friend says something you disagree with, the habit reinforces itself, making it harder to break. The most effective way to address this is not to eliminate the fear entirely, but to practice speaking up in smaller, low-risk situations. Each time you do, it builds the understanding that judgment from others is usually far less severe than it feels in the moment. Bit by bit, this creates the confidence to share thoughts when it really matters. Letting fear of judgment silence you is a mistake because it trades short-term comfort for long-term missed chances to grow, connect, and be recognized. Assuming relationships will last without effort. Friendships, family bonds, and romantic partnerships can feel secure once they're established, but they do not sustain themselves automatically. Just like anything of value, they require consistent attention and effort. The mistake many people make is believing that once a relationship is formed, it will naturally last without needing to be maintained. At first, relationships often grow quickly because both people are investing time and energy. You check in, listen carefully, and make an effort to show appreciation. Over time, comfort sets in, and it becomes easy to assume that closeness will remain even if you stop putting in the same level of care. But when small efforts fade, distance begins to build. Messages go unanswered, quality time gets replaced by routine distractions, and the connection slowly weakens. Think about a long friendship where you no longer call regularly. The bond might still exist, but if neither person reaches out, the silence eventually turns into unfamiliarity. The same is true in families when gratitude is replaced with assumption, or in romantic relationships when communication becomes one-sided. Relationships decline not because of one major event, but because of small, consistent neglect. Effort doesn't have to be grand. It can be sending a quick check-in text, listening without interruption, or carving out time to share an experience. These actions communicate that the relationship matters and prevent it from drifting into the background. Strong relationships are built on maintenance as much as on initial connection. They rely on everyday choices to invest, respond, and participate. The idea that closeness will last without effort overlooks the reality that connection is active, not passive. Relationships stay strong when the people in them continue to put energy into keeping them alive. Chasing status instead of substance, owning the newest gadget, wearing the right brand, or posting the perfect picture can feel like progress. But these things often reflect status more than real substance. Status is about how others see you. Substance is about what actually improves your life, skills, or relationships. Confusing the two leads many people to spend time and energy chasing appearances instead of building something meaningful. At its core, status is external. It comes from recognition, approval, and comparison. For example, someone might buy an expensive car not because it serves their needs better, but because it signals success to others. Substance, on the other hand, is internal. It's the knowledge you gain from learning a skill, the health you build by exercising regularly, or the trust that grows from consistent effort in a friendship. These things may not always be visible, but they create long-term stability and value. The mistake happens when people assume that achieving status will automatically bring fulfillment. Think of the person who spends years climbing a career ladder only to realize they don't enjoy the work, or the person who invests heavily in appearances while neglecting their health or relationships. The surface may look polished, but the foundation underneath is weak. Substance requires effort that is less glamorous, but far more impactful. Reading to improve your understanding, saving consistently for financial security, or practicing patience in difficult conversations may not attract instant recognition, but they pay off in durability and resilience. Status can disappear as trends shift, or people's attention moves on, while substance remains useful no matter the circumstances. The real cost of chasing status is neglecting the investments that actually shape a stable and satisfying life. Confusing comfort with happiness. Ordering takeout, staying on the couch, and scrolling through your phone feels good in the moment. But this is comfort, not necessarily happiness. Comfort is the absence of discomfort. It's when things are easy, predictable, and safe. Happiness, on the other hand, is a deeper sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that often requires effort, growth, and sometimes even discomfort along the way. The mistake comes when people assume that maximizing comfort will automatically lead to happiness. Comfort reduces stress in the short term, but it does not create the conditions that make life meaningful. For example, avoiding exercise may feel pleasant now, but over time, it can reduce energy and health. Choosing not to take risks in work or relationships can prevent failure, but it also prevents new opportunities that could bring lasting satisfaction. Happiness is usually built through challenge and engagement. Learning a new skill can feel frustrating at first, but it brings a sense of progress. Spending time with friends may require effort and planning, but it strengthens connection. Even small acts like cooking a meal instead of ordering in can create pride and enjoyment that comfort alone doesn't provide. The problem is that comfort is easy to measure and pursue, while happiness is more complex and delayed. A soft bed, fast food, or entertainment delivers immediate relief. Happiness comes from consistency in areas like health, purpose, and relationships, which require choices that aren't always comfortable. When people confuse the two, they risk prioritizing short-term ease at the expense of long-term well-being. Comfort has its place, but without actively building the habits and experiences that create happiness, life can feel stable but unfulfilling. The difference is recognizing that happiness often requires moving beyond what feels easiest in the moment. Treating gratitude as optional. Waking up and going about the day often feels routine, but the small details that make it possible are easy to overlook. The ability to have a meal, talk with a friend, or even just sit in a safe space can slip into the background when life becomes busy. Gratitude, however, is what turns these ordinary parts of daily life into something we actively recognize as valuable. Treating it as optional means missing out on one of the simplest tools for mental clarity and resilience. At its core, gratitude is the practice of noticing what is present rather than focusing only on what is missing. Many people delay it, thinking they'll appreciate things once they achieve a bigger goal, a better job, a nicer home, or more free time. But when gratitude is reserved for special occasions, it loses its power to shape everyday perspective. Without it, even real progress can feel empty because the baseline of appreciation is never set. Consider a common example: finishing a project at work. Without gratitude, the focus shifts immediately to the next challenge, creating a cycle of pressure with little satisfaction. With gratitude, there's a pause to recognize the effort, the support received, or the opportunity to contribute, making the achievement feel complete. The same applies to personal relationships. A simple acknowledgement of someone's help or presence can strengthen bonds, while failing to do so often weakens them over time. Gratitude doesn't require dramatic gestures. It can be as basic as mentally noting a good meal, thanking a colleague for their effort, or appreciating a small act of kindness. Making it a consistent habit provides stability during setbacks and makes successes more meaningful. Treating gratitude as optional undermines well-being, while practicing it daily reinforces both perspective and connection. Neglecting to plan for emergencies. A normal day rarely feels like the time to think about emergencies. Bills are paid, routines are followed, and life seems predictable. But when unexpected problems arise, like a medical issue, a car breakdown, or sudden job loss, the absence of preparation quickly turns a difficult situation into a crisis. Neglecting to plan for emergencies is a mistake because it leaves people vulnerable to problems that could have been managed with a small amount of foresight. At its simplest, emergency planning means setting aside resources and systems to handle situations that disrupt normal life. Financially, this often takes the form of an emergency fund. Even a modest amount of savings can cover essentials like rent, food, or repairs during a sudden setback. Without it, people often resort to high-interest loans or credit cards, which create long-term financial strain. Health is another area where preparation matters. Keeping basic supplies at home, such as first aid kits or essential medicines, ensures that small problems don't escalate while waiting for professional help. Planning also extends to safety and logistics. Families benefit from discussing what to do in the event of a fire, a natural disaster, or even something as common as a power outage. Knowing where to meet, who to call, or what items to keep accessible can save time and reduce panic when conditions are stressful. Technology makes this easier, with tools like backup chargers, contact lists, and cloud storage helping people stay connected and informed during disruptions. While it may feel unnecessary during calm periods, preparation is essentially a form of insurance against the unpredictable. Emergencies can't always be avoided, but the damage they cause can be reduced. Failing to plan for them doesn't eliminate their possibility. It only removes the advantage of being ready when they arrive. Forgetting that friendships also need nurturing. It's easy to assume that friendships will always stay the same once they're formed. A friend may have been close during school, college, or the early years of work, and it can feel like the connection will remain strong no matter how much time passes. But friendships, like any other important part of life, need attention and effort to stay alive. Forgetting this is a common mistake that causes meaningful relationships to fade without anyone deciding it should happen. At the beginning, friendships often grow naturally. Shared classes, work projects, or daily routines create regular opportunities to talk and spend time together. Over time, life changes. People move, schedules shift, and responsibilities increase. Without intentional effort, those natural moments of connection disappear. A quick message to check in, making time for a call, or planning to meet becomes less frequent. Slowly, the closeness turns into distance, not because of conflict, but because of neglect. This matters because friendships provide support that goes beyond casual conversation. They are often the people who listen during stressful times, celebrate achievements, and make ordinary moments enjoyable. When these connections weaken, it can leave life feeling more isolated, even if nothing obvious seems wrong. For example, someone who once had regular game nights with friends may find months go by without speaking to them, and the bond that once felt effortless now feels awkward to restart. Nurturing friendships does not require grand gestures. Simple actions, like remembering important dates, checking in after a difficult week, or suggesting a small plan, keep the relationship active. Consistency is what signals that the friendship still matters. Overlooking the need to maintain friendships is a mistake that quietly erodes some of the most valuable connections in life. Wasting energy on arguments that don't matter. Disagreements happen in everyday life, whether at work, at home, or even in small social settings. The mistake comes when too much time and emotional energy is spent on arguments that have little real impact. These are the kinds of debates where the outcome changes nothing important, yet the discussion drags on, leaving both sides frustrated. Often, these arguments begin with something minor, like which route is faster to the store, or whether a detail in a story was exactly right. In the moment, it can feel necessary to correct the other person or prove a point. But once the argument ends, the result rarely makes a difference to anyone's well-being, productivity, or relationships. What does remain is the tension and the time lost that could have been used more constructively. The underlying problem is that these small conflicts take attention away from what actually matters. Instead of focusing on finishing a task, strengthening a relationship, or solving a meaningful issue, energy gets redirected into proving who is right. For instance, an employee might argue for 20 minutes over a small formatting choice in a presentation, while the bigger priority, the message of the presentation itself, gets neglected. At home, family members might spend an evening debating trivial household preferences rather than enjoying their time together. Recognizing the difference between a meaningful disagreement and a pointless one is the key. If the issue has no real consequence or the outcome does not change anything important, stepping back saves time and stress. Not every point needs to be settled, and letting small things go can prevent unnecessary conflict from piling up. Wasting energy on arguments that don't matter is a mistake, because it drains attention from the priorities that actually deserve focus and effort. Not preparing for the inevitability of aging. Every person ages, but the mistake many make is moving through life as if it won't happen to them. The changes may feel far away when someone is young or busy, but aging is not an unexpected event. It's a gradual process that shapes health, finances, and independence over time. On a physical level, bodies naturally lose strength, flexibility, and endurance. Without preparation, simple activities like climbing stairs or carrying groceries can become difficult sooner than expected. Preparing means maintaining regular exercise, balanced nutrition, and preventive health checkups rather than waiting until problems appear. Financial preparation is equally important. People often underestimate how long they will live or how much money will be needed for later years. Relying only on short-term income leaves little security for retirement, medical costs, or unexpected challenges. Saving gradually, setting aside even small amounts over time, creates a safety net that reduces stress when regular work is no longer possible. There is also the social side of aging. Friendships and family networks shift, and those who do not invest in meaningful relationships may find themselves isolated. Maintaining strong connections, joining community groups, or staying involved in purposeful activities ensures that aging does not bring unnecessary loneliness. Practical adjustments also help. Preparing living spaces for future needs, such as reducing clutter, improving lighting, or choosing homes that will be easier to manage, prevents difficulties later. These small forward-looking steps make the transition into older years smoother and safer. The mistake of not preparing for aging is rooted in treating it as a distant concern rather than a predictable stage of life. Taking small, steady steps in health, finances, relationships, and environment makes later years more secure and manageable. Staying stuck in nostalgia instead of building forward. Looking back on good times can feel comforting, but the mistake happens when someone spends more energy reliving the past than creating a future. Nostalgia itself isn't harmful. It can remind people of meaningful experiences or provide a sense of identity. The problem begins when it shifts from appreciation into avoidance, making it harder to adapt, grow, or take on new opportunities. For example, someone might constantly talk about their college years or an old job while ignoring the chance to build new skills in the present. Another person might replay past relationships, comparing every new experience to what once was, which prevents them from forming stronger connections now. In these cases, the focus on what used to be overshadows what could be. This habit can influence decision-making in subtle ways. Instead of learning a new tool at work, someone may cling to the methods they've always used. Instead of trying new hobbies or environments, they return only to familiar routines that feel safe. Over time, this limits progress, reduces resilience, and narrows the range of experiences that shape a person's life. It also affects long-term satisfaction. While memories can bring comfort, they cannot substitute for growth. People who stay anchored in nostalgia may find the present feels less meaningful, not because it lacks potential, but because it is never given the same chance as the past once had. Building forward requires intentional effort. It means taking lessons from old experiences but applying them toward new goals. It could be as simple as investing in new friendships, updating skills, or setting personal challenges that expand confidence. By balancing respect for the past with action in the present, life remains active, adaptable, and open to what comes next. Believing multitasking makes you effective. Checking emails while sitting in a meeting or scrolling through your phone during a conversation can feel like productivity, but it's usually the opposite. Multitasking is often seen as a way to get more done, yet in reality, it divides attention and reduces the quality of each task. At the most basic level, the brain doesn't perform two demanding activities at the same time. Instead, it switches rapidly between them. Each switch takes energy and focus, creating small delays that add up. For instance, writing a report while answering chat messages can leave both tasks slower and filled with more mistakes than if they were handled one after the other. This shows up in everyday life. A person cooking dinner while on the phone might burn food or miss details in the conversation. At work, someone toggling between spreadsheets and presentations might feel busy, but deliver results that are less thorough. The sense of being productive comes from activity, not from actual efficiency. The hidden cost is mental fatigue. Constantly shifting attention makes tasks feel more stressful and leaves less energy for deeper thinking. It also makes memory weaker, since details are not processed fully before the mind moves on. Over time, the habit of multitasking can create a cycle of busyness without meaningful progress. The alternative is single tasking, or focusing on one priority at a time. Even short, uninterrupted sessions on a project are more effective than stretched out work filled with interruptions. Daily routines, like setting aside 10 minutes only for email or blocking focused time for complex tasks, can lead to better results with less effort. Believing multitasking makes you effective is a mistake because it trades real progress for the illusion of productivity, leaving both time and energy poorly spent. Choosing to stay ignorant because it's easier. Ignoring a bank statement, avoiding a doctor's visit, or skipping instructions at work can feel like the easier choice in the moment, but it often creates bigger problems later. Choosing to stay ignorant is a way of delaying discomfort, yet it usually comes with a higher cost over time. At its core, ignorance is not the absence of information, but the decision to avoid it. People often do this because the truth feels overwhelming, inconvenient, or even threatening. For example, someone might avoid learning how their retirement savings work because it seems too complicated, or they might refuse to read up on nutrition because it could challenge their eating habits. The short-term relief comes from not confronting the responsibility that knowledge brings. The problem is that important details don't disappear just because they are ignored. A person who avoids checking their credit card balance still owes the money. Someone who doesn't go for regular health checkups may miss early signs of conditions that could be treated more easily if caught sooner. By shutting out information, the ability to make informed decisions is weakened, and the consequences eventually surface. This pattern also shows up in everyday routines. Skipping the effort to learn a new workplace system can leave a person less skilled and less competitive over time. Avoiding difficult but necessary conversations can lead to misunderstandings that grow harder to resolve. While ignorance feels comfortable, it reduces options and limits growth. The opposite approach is leaning into awareness, even when it feels uncomfortable. Acknowledging problems and gathering information early gives more room to act and adapt. Choosing to stay ignorant because it's easier is a mistake, because it trades short-term comfort for long-term difficulty. Forgetting to take breaks before burnout, pushing through a long day without pausing, often feels productive, but over time it drains both energy and focus. Forgetting to take breaks is a common mistake that can quietly lead to burnout. The basic idea is simple. The mind and body are not designed for endless, uninterrupted effort. Concentration works in cycles. Just like a muscle, it needs periods of rest to recover and perform at its best. When someone skips breaks, the immediate effect might be a slight drop in attention. But if this pattern repeats, it builds into exhaustion, irritability, and a steep decline in productivity. Everyday examples make this easy to see. A student who studies for hours without stopping often ends up rereading the same paragraph without absorbing the material. An office worker glued to their computer all afternoon might notice more mistakes in emails or slower problem solving by the end of the day. Even physical tasks like cooking a large meal or doing yard work become harder without short pauses. In each case, the quality of effort decreases, even if the hours look impressive on paper. Breaks don't need to be long or complicated to work. Stepping away from a desk for 5 minutes, stretching, drinking water, or even taking a short walk helps reset attention and reduce stress. These pauses allow the brain to consolidate information and the body to relax, making the next stretch of work more effective. The danger of ignoring breaks is that the warning signs of burnout often appear only when fatigue is already advanced. By then, recovery takes far longer than it would have if rest had been built in from the start. Forgetting to take breaks before burnout is a mistake because it turns steady progress into exhaustion that could have been avoided. Not recognizing when to quit. Sticking with something too long can feel like determination, but sometimes it crosses into refusing to quit when quitting is the smarter choice. Not recognizing when to quit is a mistake that drains time, energy, and opportunity. At its core, the issue is about sunk costs. Once people invest effort, money, or emotion into something, they feel pressure to continue, even if it's no longer working. The belief is that quitting means failure, but in reality, persistence isn't always productive. The longer someone pushes in the wrong direction, the harder it becomes to shift course. You can see this play out in many parts of daily life. A student may stick with a subject they dislike because they have already spent a year studying it, even though switching majors could lead to more success. Someone might stay in a job they've outgrown, hoping it will eventually feel rewarding while passing up better opportunities. Even in simple situations, like trying to fix an old appliance, hours of effort might be wasted when replacing it would have been faster and cheaper. In each case, the refusal to quit leads to more frustration and fewer gains. The key skill is recognizing the difference between persistence that moves you forward and persistence that keeps you stuck. Taking a step back, asking whether the effort is leading to meaningful progress, and comparing it to alternative options makes the choice clearer. Quitting isn't the same as giving up. It's a decision to stop wasting resources where they no longer bring value. Not recognizing when to quit is a mistake because it locks people into commitments that no longer serve them, while the chance to redirect that effort towards something better slips away. Thinking vulnerability equals weakness, admitting how you really feel, can be uncomfortable, and for many people, that discomfort gets confused with weakness. The mistake lies in believing that showing vulnerability means you're fragile or incapable, when in reality, it often takes more strength to be open than to stay closed off. Vulnerability is simply the willingness to share your true thoughts, emotions, or struggles without hiding behind a mask of perfection. Avoiding it may feel safer in the short term, but over time, it creates distance in relationships and limits personal growth. When someone always pretends to be fine, others can't see what's really going on, and opportunities for connection or help are lost. In everyday life, this plays out in subtle but important ways. An employee might hesitate to admit they don't understand a task, fearing it will make them look incompetent. As a result, they stay silent, struggle on their own, and risk making avoidable mistakes. A friend might avoid telling others they're going through a hard time, worried it will be a burden, yet this silence prevents them from receiving support that could make the situation easier. Even in families, parents who never show vulnerability can give children the impression that emotions should always be hidden, which makes it harder for them to learn healthy coping skills. The truth is, being vulnerable invites trust and understanding. It creates stronger connections because it shows authenticity. It also opens the door to learning, since admitting you don't know something is often the first step to improvement. Thinking vulnerability equals weakness is a mistake because it discourages openness and growth, when in fact vulnerability is a powerful way to build trust, resilience, and genuine human connection. Letting procrastination steal years. Putting off tasks for later is something almost everyone does, but when procrastination becomes a habit, it doesn't just delay small chores, it can quietly take years away. The mistake lies in underestimating how often postponing things compounds into lost opportunities, stalled progress, and unnecessary stress. Procrastination is the act of avoiding a task you know needs attention by replacing it with something easier or more comfortable. At first, this can feel harmless. Leaving an assignment until the night before or ignoring a household repair for weeks seems manageable in the moment. But over time, repeated delays pile up. A student who regularly postpones studying may struggle to keep up with their courses. A worker who keeps putting off a career change can look back after years and realize they stayed stuck in the same role far longer than intended. The problem is that procrastination creates the illusion of time while silently eating it away. An unfinished project doesn't just sit still. It weighs on the mind and drains energy. People often spend more time worrying about what they're avoiding than it would take to simply start. Procrastination also prevents growth. Someone who keeps waiting to learn a new skill, start saving money, or exercise regularly may find they've let months or years pass without progress. What makes this mistake so damaging is how subtle it is. Each delay feels small, but the cumulative effect reshapes entire timelines. By the time someone notices, opportunities have slipped by, and catching up is harder than it needed to be. Letting procrastination steal years is a mistake because it disguises wasted time as harmless delay, when in reality, consistent postponing erodes progress and limits what can be achieved. Relying too much on luck, buying lottery tickets, hoping for a sudden promotion, or waiting for the perfect opportunity to appear are all examples of relying on luck to shape outcomes. While chance can play a role in success, making it the main strategy is a mistake that leaves important areas of life to uncertainty. Luck is unpredictable by nature. Some people are in the right place at the right time, but that is not something anyone can consistently control. Depending too heavily on luck often leads to passivity. A person might put off learning new skills because they expect circumstances to work out, or avoid planning finances because they believe something will come through. This approach feels easier in the short term, but it rarely creates lasting results. Effort and preparation build the conditions where luck can matter. For example, someone who improves their qualifications is more likely to notice and benefit from an unexpected job opening. A person who saves consistently is in a better position to handle a financial windfall wisely. In contrast, relying only on luck without building these foundations often means missed opportunities or wasted chances when they do arise. The difference can be seen in everyday choices. Choosing to invest time in health, relationships, and personal growth creates resilience so that when luck does appear, it adds to an already stable foundation rather than serving as the only hope. Without that base, setbacks feel more severe and success feels out of reach unless chance intervenes. Relying too much on luck is a mistake because it shifts responsibility away from action and preparation, leaving outcomes to chance instead of building the conditions where success becomes more likely. Believing self-improvement has an endpoint. It's easy to think of self-improvement as a task you can eventually complete, like finishing a course or reaching a fitness goal. The mistake is assuming that once a milestone is met, the process is over. In reality, personal growth is ongoing, and treating it like a project with an end date limits long-term progress. Self-improvement can take many forms. Someone might work on their health by exercising regularly, focus on their career by developing new skills, or strengthen relationships by improving communication. These steps bring real benefits, but stopping at a single achievement often leads to stagnation. For example, exercising for a few months to lose weight can help in the short term, but if the effort ends once the target is reached, old habits tend to return. The same happens in professional life. Learning one new skill might give a temporary boost, but as industries evolve, a refusal to keep adapting leaves a person behind. This mistake is reinforced by the idea that growth has a finish line. People might say, "Once I get this promotion, I'll be set," or "Once I save this amount, I'll be done." But circumstances change, workplaces shift, relationships evolve, and even personal goals transform over time. Believing improvement has a fixed end makes it harder to adjust when life presents new challenges. Real progress works more like maintenance than completion. Just as brushing your teeth isn't something you do once and forget, self-improvement requires steady attention. Building resilience, communication, or discipline isn't a one-time effort, but a continuing practice that strengthens through repetition. Believing self-improvement has an endpoint is a mistake because it stops growth prematurely, while real development depends on treating it as a lifelong process. Staying in echo chambers of opinion, scrolling through news feeds, or chatting with the same group of friends often feels comfortable because the views you hear match your own. The mistake is staying inside this comfort zone and only engaging with opinions that echo what you already believe. Over time, this narrows perspective and makes it harder to understand the world in a balanced way. An echo chamber forms when people surround themselves with information and voices that consistently agree with their existing views. Online platforms make this easy by recommending content based on what you already like. Offline, it can happen when you only talk politics, culture, or lifestyle with people who think the same way you do. While this creates a sense of certainty, it also shields you from the reality that different viewpoints exist and often carry valuable insights. The effects are gradual but noticeable. Someone who only follows one type of news source may start to believe their side is the only rational one, while dismissing others as uninformed. A workplace team that avoids debate may miss out on creative solutions because everyone hesitates to challenge the majority opinion. Even in personal growth, hearing only affirmations of your own perspective can prevent you from recognizing blind spots that others might see clearly. Breaking out of an echo chamber doesn't mean agreeing with every opposing view. It means seeking exposure to a wider range of ideas, weighing evidence fairly, and being willing to question assumptions. This might look like reading multiple sources on the same story, asking questions in a discussion instead of shutting it down, or surrounding yourself with people who see things differently. Staying in echo chambers of opinion is a mistake because it creates the illusion of certainty while limiting the ability to think critically and adapt. Not practicing patience, waiting in line at the store, sitting in traffic, or refreshing a slow-loading page are everyday moments that test patience. The mistake many people make is treating impatience as harmless, when in reality it shapes bigger decisions and habits over time. At its core, impatience is the desire for immediate results. It can show up in small ways, like abandoning a cooking recipe because it takes too long, or in larger choices, like quitting a skill or project because progress feels slow. Modern life makes this easier with fast food, one-click purchases, and instant entertainment setting the expectation that most things should happen quickly. But when this mindset carries over into personal growth, relationships, or careers, it often creates frustration and short-term thinking. Consider learning a language. The process requires steady practice over months and years. Someone who expects fluency within a few weeks may lose motivation once reality sets in. The same applies to fitness goals, saving money, or advancing in a job. Without patience, people tend to jump from one shortcut to the next, rarely sticking with a path long enough to see meaningful results. Relationships also suffer when patience isn't practiced. Misunderstandings take time to resolve, and trust develops slowly. Someone who expects immediate harmony may walk away too soon or push others in ways that backfire. In professional settings, impatience with colleagues or projects can create unnecessary stress, leading to rushed work and avoidable mistakes. Practicing patience does not mean doing nothing. It means recognizing that worthwhile outcomes often take time and effort, and being willing to continue even when progress feels slower than expected. Not practicing patience is a mistake because it prevents people from staying consistent long enough to achieve lasting results in important areas of life. Believing you must figure everything out alone, trying to handle every challenge by yourself is a common habit, especially when the problem feels personal. Many people believe that figuring things out alone shows independence or strength, but this often turns into a mistake that slows progress and creates unnecessary stress. At its simplest, the idea comes from wanting control. You run into a problem at work, like struggling with a new tool or process, and instead of asking a colleague for guidance, you spend hours trying to solve it in isolation. The same happens in school when a student avoids asking a teacher for clarification, or in personal life when someone hides financial struggles instead of reaching out for advice. The desire to do it alone may feel admirable, but it usually wastes time and increases frustration. Support from others often makes the path clearer. In a workplace, Mentors and teammates can share shortcuts they've already learned. In relationships, opening up about challenges creates trust and allows solutions to come from multiple perspectives. Even in hobbies, joining a community or learning from others accelerates growth compared to trial and error. Believing you must figure everything out alone also creates the risk of repeating mistakes that others have already solved. For example, trying to start a business without guidance often leads to errors that could have been avoided by simply talking with someone experienced. Over time, this habit can reinforce feelings of isolation and make problems seem bigger than they are. The reality is that collaboration and asking for help are not signs of weakness. They are practical strategies for moving forward more effectively. Believing you must figure everything out alone is a mistake because it limits growth, wastes time, and prevents people from benefiting from the knowledge and support already available around them. Ignoring environmental responsibility. Everyday choices like leaving lights on or throwing something in the trash instead of recycling may feel small, but together they add up to a bigger problem. Ignoring environmental responsibility is a mistake that affects not just the planet, but also daily life in practical ways. At its core, environmental responsibility means recognizing how individual habits impact shared resources. For example, leaving the tap running while brushing your teeth may not seem like much, but over weeks and months, it wastes a surprising amount of clean water. Using disposable plastics because they are convenient may feel harmless, yet those plastics often end up in landfills or waterways where they take decades to break down. Driving short distances instead of walking or using public transport adds unnecessary emissions to the air, which affects air quality in the very neighborhoods where people live. The impact of ignoring these responsibilities is not distant or abstract. Rising energy use leads to higher household bills. Poor waste management contributes to overflowing dumps that cities have to fund and maintain. Polluted water supplies can create health concerns that cost communities more in treatment and infrastructure. Small actions ripple outward, and when multiplied across millions of people, they create significant consequences. The mistake comes from underestimating how much influence personal habits carry. Recycling, conserving water, reducing unnecessary energy use, or choosing sustainable products are not grand gestures, but they help slow down problems that become harder and more expensive to fix later. Even small improvements like switching to reusable bags or adjusting a thermostat by a degree make a difference when adopted consistently. Ignoring environmental responsibility is a mistake because it overlooks the direct connection between everyday actions and the quality of the environment we all depend on. Refusing to adapt to change shows up in daily life in ways both big and small, whether it's new technology at work, shifting routines at home, or unexpected circumstances that alter familiar plans. Refusing to adapt to these changes is a common mistake that can quietly limit progress and create unnecessary frustration. At the simplest level, adapting to change means being willing to adjust when the old way no longer works. For instance, consider someone who avoids using online banking because they are used to handling everything in person. It may feel comfortable to stick with what they know, but over time, this choice makes simple tasks more inconvenient, while everyone else benefits from faster and more efficient options. Similarly, in the workplace, new tools or systems are often introduced to improve productivity. Resisting them may feel like holding on to stability, but it often results in falling behind while colleagues move ahead. The mistake is not in preferring familiarity, but in refusing to accept that change is constant. Life rarely stays the same for long. Health, relationships, technology, and careers all shift in ways no one can fully predict. Those who resist adjusting may find themselves unprepared when circumstances demand flexibility. For example, a person unwilling to learn new skills may struggle to find work if their job is replaced by automation. On a smaller scale, even resisting changes in daily habits, like healthier eating or regular exercise, can prevent improvements that directly affect well-being. Adapting does not mean abandoning what worked before. It means updating choices to match current realities. Small steps like learning a new app, adjusting to new routines, or being open to different perspectives make it easier to keep moving forward. Refusing to adapt to change is a mistake because it allows comfort in the short term while creating greater difficulty in the long term. Forgetting to enjoy the present moment. Daily life often feels like a list of things waiting to be done: work tasks, errands, or future plans. In the middle of that rush, it becomes easy to forget to enjoy the moment you are actually in. This mistake, while common, slowly takes away from experiences that can never be repeated. At the most basic level, enjoying the present means paying attention to what is happening right now instead of only focusing on what comes next. For example, someone might eat dinner while scrolling through messages or thinking about tomorrow's schedule. The meal is finished, but it barely feels like it happened because the mind was elsewhere. The same happens with time spent with friends or family. A person may be in the room but distracted, missing the small details that give those interactions their meaning. Forgetting the present often comes from focusing too much on either the past or the future. Planning ahead is useful, and remembering past lessons has value. But when those become constant, the present moment is pushed aside. Over time, this habit can make even enjoyable experiences feel routine, as if life is being lived on autopilot. For instance, a parent who spends years focused only on providing for the future might later realize they missed the everyday moments of their child growing up. Enjoying the present does not mean ignoring responsibilities or long-term goals. It means finding balance by noticing the details that are happening now, tasting food without distraction, paying attention during a conversation, or even taking a short break to appreciate a quiet moment. These simple acts do not slow progress, but instead make daily life feel fuller and more meaningful. Forgetting to enjoy the present moment is a mistake because it prevents people from experiencing the very life they are working so hard to build. Losing touch with childhood passions. As people grow older, daily routines often leave little room for the activities that once brought genuine excitement. Childhood passions, whether drawing, playing a sport, building things, or exploring outdoors, can slowly fade into distant memories when responsibilities take over. Losing touch with these early interests is a mistake that leaves life narrower than it needs to be. At its core, childhood passion is not just about fun. It is a natural expression of curiosity and enthusiasm. A child who spent hours sketching in notebooks or assembling model cars was not just passing time. They were discovering what made them feel engaged and alive. As adults, those same activities often get pushed aside by work, bills, and the pressure to be productive. What once felt important is treated as optional and eventually forgotten. The problem with letting go of these interests is that they often hold lasting value. Someone who loved reading stories as a child might have developed creativity and empathy through that habit. Someone who enjoyed sports might have carried forward lessons in teamwork and discipline. When these passions disappear, the skills and joy connected to them fade as well. Over time, life can start to feel more like a cycle of tasks than something personally meaningful. This does not mean every childhood hobby must become a career. Instead, it is about keeping small parts of those passions alive in adult life. Picking up a guitar again, joining a casual sports league, or simply drawing in a notebook for 10 minutes can restore a sense of balance. These activities provide outlets for creativity and stress relief, while reconnecting a person with what naturally energized them in the past. Losing touch with childhood passions is a mistake, because it often means letting go of activities that once gave life its spark. Not teaching what you've learned to others. Learning something new often feels like a personal achievement, but its real value is tested when it is shared with others. A common mistake people make is keeping knowledge to themselves, either assuming others will figure it out on their own or believing it is not their responsibility to explain. This choice not only limits the impact of what has been learned, but also weakens how deeply the knowledge is understood. Teaching is one of the most effective ways to reinforce what you know. When someone explains a concept to a coworker, a friend, or even a family member, they are forced to break it down into clear steps. That process reveals gaps in their own understanding and makes the idea easier to remember long term. For example, a person who learns a new software tool at work but never shows others how to use it may quickly forget details themselves. In contrast, someone who walks a teammate through the same process builds both memory and confidence. Sharing knowledge also multiplies its usefulness. A tip about managing time, a strategy for saving money, or even a cooking technique can save others effort and mistakes. In workplaces, this habit prevents knowledge from being locked in one person's head, reducing the risk of setbacks if that person is unavailable. In personal life, teaching creates connections, since people appreciate when someone takes the time to explain rather than just perform a task silently. Avoiding the effort of teaching often comes from fear of not being an expert, or from underestimating the value of what has been learned. But expertise is not required. Even simple lessons can make a difference. Not teaching what you have learned to others is a mistake, because it limits both your own growth and the benefit that knowledge could bring to those around you. Ignoring the power of small daily consistency. Learning something new often feels like a personal achievement, but its real value is tested when it is shared with others. A common mistake people make is keeping knowledge to themselves, either assuming others will figure it out on their own or believing it is not their responsibility to explain. This choice not only limits the impact of what has been learned, but also weakens how deeply the knowledge is understood. Teaching is one of the most effective ways to reinforce what you know. When someone explains a concept to a coworker, a friend, or even a family member, they are forced to break it down into clear steps. That process reveals gaps in their own understanding and makes the idea easier to remember long term. For example, a person who learns a new software tool at work but never shows others how to use it may quickly forget details themselves. In contrast, someone who walks a teammate through the same process builds both memory and confidence. Sharing knowledge also multiplies its usefulness. A tip about managing time, a strategy for saving money, or even a cooking technique can save others effort and mistakes. In workplaces, this habit prevents knowledge from being locked in one person's head, reducing the risk of setbacks if that person is unavailable. In personal life, teaching creates connections, since people appreciate when someone takes the time to explain, rather than just perform a task silently. Avoiding the effort of teaching often comes from fear of not being an expert, or from underestimating the value of what has been learned. But expertise is not required. Even simple lessons can make a difference. Not teaching what you have learned to others is a mistake because it limits both your own growth and the benefit that knowledge could bring to those around you. Thinking success is a final destination. Many people go through life treating success as if it were a finish line to cross. The belief that one major achievement will provide lasting fulfillment is a mistake that can lead to frustration and burnout. Success is not a single point in time, but an ongoing process that shifts as circumstances and priorities change. A student may think graduating will mark the end of hard work, only to discover that maintaining a career requires just as much effort. Someone saving for a home might assume buying it will create permanent stability. Yet owning property comes with new responsibilities and unexpected costs. Even professionals who work for years to reach a promotion often realize the role demands more adaptation rather than less. In each case, the expectation of a final reward gives way to the reality that goals keep evolving. This misunderstanding often stems from how success is presented early in life. Milestones like exams, degrees, or job offers are treated as conclusive victories, when in truth they are starting points for the next stage. Believing otherwise can cause disappointment because the satisfaction of reaching a goal is usually temporary. What lasts is the ability to adjust, improve, and continue setting meaningful targets. When success is seen as permanent, people risk becoming stagnant after an achievement or anxious when progress feels unfinished. On the other hand, recognizing it as a continuous process encourages flexibility. It allows someone to celebrate reaching a fitness target while still committing to healthier routines, or to enjoy building a career without expecting it to stay unchanged. Thinking of success as a final destination is a mistake because it misrepresents reality. Real growth comes from treating success as a moving path rather than a single, permanent endpoint. Not listening carefully when others speak. Conversations happen every day, yet many people fall into the habit of only half listening when others speak. This mistake seems small, but it can weaken relationships, cause misunderstandings, and create missed opportunities. Not listening carefully is more than just being distracted. It means failing to fully take in what someone is trying to communicate. At its core, listening requires focus. In practice, however, people often think about their next response, check their phones, or let their minds wander while someone is talking. A friend might share a story, and instead of paying attention, the listener waits for a chance to tell a similar story of their own. In a workplace, a manager may outline instructions, but an employee who tunes out small details ends up completing the task incorrectly. These moments add up, and the speaker often feels ignored or unimportant. The consequences of this mistake show up in many areas of life. Poor listening can strain personal relationships, where one person starts to believe their thoughts are undervalued. In professional settings, it leads to repeated explanations, avoidable errors, and wasted time. Even in casual interactions, like talking with a cashier or neighbor, inattentive listening can make exchanges feel rushed or dismissive. Listening carefully does not mean sitting silently. It involves small but active behaviors, like maintaining eye contact, nodding at key points, and asking clarifying questions. These simple actions signal attention and encourage more open communication. Over time, they build trust and make conversations more productive. Failing to listen carefully is a common mistake because it happens quietly, without immediate consequences. But its long-term impact on relationships and effectiveness is significant, which is why treating listening as a deliberate skill is an essential part of daily life. Failing to prepare for death, yours or loved ones. Most people spend time planning their careers, finances, and even vacations, but far fewer prepare for the one event that is certain: death. Avoiding this reality is a common mistake, and it often leaves families struggling with difficult decisions and preventable problems at the worst possible moment. Preparation begins with practical steps. Creating a will is one of the most basic but important actions. It clearly states who should inherit property, savings, or even personal belongings. Without one, families may be forced into long legal processes, and disputes can arise over even simple matters. Another key step is designating someone to handle medical decisions if you are unable to. Without this, loved ones may be left guessing about what type of care you would have wanted, leading to confusion and conflict. Preparation also extends beyond legal documents. Everyday organization makes a difference. Having insurance policies, bank details, or account passwords written down in one safe place prevents family members from facing unnecessary delays or financial complications. Even something as straightforward as keeping track of monthly bills can save loved ones hours of stress later. Conversations are another essential part. Talking openly about funeral preferences, medical care, or how personal possessions should be handled may feel uncomfortable, but it ensures that family members know your wishes. For example, a relative might assume you want a traditional service when you would have preferred something simpler. Clarifying these choices removes uncertainty and allows people to focus on grieving and supporting one another. Failing to prepare for death does not stop it from happening. It only shifts the responsibility onto those left behind. Taking care of these matters in advance reduces confusion, lowers stress, and gives families the space to manage loss with greater clarity. Believing stress is just part of life. Waking up already feeling tense, rushing through traffic, and juggling deadlines has become so routine for many people that stress starts to feel normal. The mistake lies in accepting this constant strain as just another part of life, instead of recognizing it as a problem that needs attention. Stress itself is a natural response. It helps the body react to challenges, like staying alert during an important presentation or focusing while studying for an exam. But when stress becomes ongoing, it stops being useful and begins to wear the body down. Headaches, poor sleep, irritability, and trouble concentrating are common signs, yet they are often brushed aside as minor inconveniences. Over time, these small signals add up to more serious health issues such as high blood pressure, heart problems, or weakened immunity. Believing stress is unavoidable also prevents people from making changes that could improve daily life. For instance, someone might keep working late every night, assuming the exhaustion is just the price of success. Another person may constantly check emails, thinking it's required to stay on top of things, while never realizing that this habit keeps their mind in a constant state of alertness. The truth is that stress can be managed with practical steps. Taking short breaks during the day, keeping boundaries between work and personal time, exercising, or even practicing simple breathing techniques can lower its impact. Equally important is recognizing when certain commitments or habits are causing unnecessary strain and adjusting them before they become long-term problems. Accepting stress as an unchangeable part of life leads to burnout and declining health. Understanding it as something that can be managed gives people the chance to live with greater focus, energy, and resilience. Underestimating the effect of your circle of friends, the people you spend time with, shape more of your daily behavior than you often realize. From the way you talk, to the habits you form, to the choices you make, your circle of friends quietly influences much of it. Underestimating this effect is a mistake that can lead you to drift into patterns you never intentionally chose. At the most basic level, human behavior is contagious. If your friends regularly stay out late, you're more likely to join, even when you plan to rest. If they treat exercise as optional, chances are you'll find yourself skipping it too. These aren't forced decisions, but small shifts in behavior that happen naturally when you're surrounded by certain attitudes. This influence extends beyond habits into outlook and ambition. A person who spends time with friends who constantly complain about work may slowly lower their own expectations for career growth. In contrast, being around people who set goals and push themselves creates an environment where striving forward feels normal. Even spending time with friends who are careful with money or careless with it can affect how you handle your own finances. What makes this tricky is how subtle it is. Most people believe they make choices independently, when in reality, much of their behavior is shaped by what they see repeated around them. Over time, this influence compounds, nudging life in a certain direction without much conscious thought. Recognizing the effect of your circle of friends doesn't mean cutting people off for small differences. It means becoming aware of the values and habits you're repeatedly exposed to, and choosing your environment as carefully as you choose your goals. The people closest to you play a direct role in the path your life takes. Not celebrating progress along the way. A common mistake people make is waiting until a goal is fully achieved before allowing themselves to feel accomplished. In daily life, this often looks like finishing a big project at work, losing a set amount of weight, or saving up for a purchase, and refusing to acknowledge any progress until the finish line is reached. The problem is that long goals are built from many smaller steps, and ignoring those steps makes the process feel heavier than it needs to. Celebrating progress along the way isn't about throwing a party for every minor effort, but about recognizing that steady improvement matters. For example, someone learning a new language might only feel proud once they can hold a full conversation, but acknowledging the moment they first understand a short sentence or successfully order food provides motivation to keep going. Without those small checkpoints, it's easy to feel like nothing is happening, even when progress is real. This same principle applies to everyday routines. A person trying to build a fitness habit might dismiss completing 2 workouts in a week because it doesn't match their end goal of 5. But noticing and appreciating the effort of starting makes it more likely they'll stick with it long enough to improve. In work settings, managers who recognize milestones in a project often see their teams more engaged, compared to those who only comment when the final product is delivered. Overlooking these opportunities for acknowledgement can lead to burnout, frustration, and a constant sense that nothing is enough. When people only reward themselves at the very end, they miss the motivation that comes from knowing their efforts are already paying off. Recognizing progress as it happens keeps momentum alive and makes long-term goals more sustainable. Neglecting creative expression. Many people go through their routines without giving time to any form of creative expression. Daily responsibilities like work, errands, and family often take priority, leaving little space for activities that involve imagination or self-expression. The result is that creative outlets are treated as optional extras rather than valuable parts of a balanced life. Creative expression doesn't just mean painting or writing novels. It includes everyday activities like cooking a meal in a new way, doodling on a notepad, playing an instrument, or even rearranging a room to make it feel more personal. These are ways people process emotions, reduce stress, and bring variety into otherwise repetitive schedules. When they are neglected, life can begin to feel mechanical and less fulfilling, even if everything else seems to be in order. One of the reasons people overlook creative activities is the belief that they need to be skilled at them for it to matter. For example, someone might avoid drawing because they think they aren't good enough, But the benefits of creative expression don't depend on performance. A person humming a tune in the car or sketching casually during a meeting still experiences the mental relief and satisfaction that creativity provides. Research consistently shows that creative activities improve problem solving, lower stress levels, and support overall mental health. In workplaces, employees who engage in creative hobbies outside of work often bring fresh ideas to their jobs. In families, parents who share creative time with children not only bond more deeply, but also model the importance of self-expression. The mistake of neglecting creative expression isn't always obvious, but over time it can contribute to stress, lack of motivation, and reduced mental well-being. Making space for small acts of creativity helps maintain balance and strengthens both emotional and cognitive health. Living someone else's dream instead of your own. A common mistake people make is shaping their lives around what others expect rather than what they truly want. This often starts early, with parents, teachers, or peers suggesting what kind of career, lifestyle, or success is worth pursuing. Over time, those external ideas can become so strong that individuals stop questioning whether the path they are on actually matches their own interests or values. Living someone else's dream usually means following goals that look good from the outside, but don't feel fulfilling on the inside. For example, a person might choose a stable but uninspiring career because their family encouraged it, even though they once had a passion for something more creative. Another person may stay in a social circle that values status or wealth, even if they personally value freedom or balance more than recognition. In both cases, the individual is achieving milestones but not feeling genuine satisfaction from them. This mistake doesn't always feel obvious in the beginning. External approval, promotions, or material rewards can give the illusion of progress. But when those achievements don't align with personal priorities, they often create a sense of emptiness. Over time, this gap can lead to stress, burnout, or the feeling of being stuck in a life that doesn't really fit. Defining and pursuing your own dream doesn't necessarily mean rejecting all advice or expectations. It means taking the time to reflect on what actually motivates you, what kind of challenges excite you, and what kind of life feels meaningful to you. Without this process, it's easy to spend years chasing goals that belong to someone else. The mistake of living by another person's definition of success can limit both fulfillment and growth, making it crucial to clarify and follow your own direction. Waiting for external validation. People often hold back on decisions or actions because they are waiting for someone else to approve of what they are doing. This is the mistake of relying on external validation, where progress depends more on others' reactions than on personal conviction. It shows up in everyday life, from hesitating to share an idea at work until a colleague agrees, to postponing a personal project until friends or family show support. At its core, this habit shifts the focus of decision-making away from individual judgment and toward outside approval. While feedback and advice can be useful, constantly needing others to confirm your choices can create dependency. Instead of asking whether something is meaningful or valuable to you, the main question becomes whether others will like it. Over time, this mistake can have a significant impact. For example, someone with a creative hobby might delay sharing their work because they worry about how it will be received. Another person might avoid trying a new career path because they are waiting for reassurance that it is the right move. In both cases, opportunities for growth are missed simply because approval wasn't guaranteed. The problem is that external validation is inconsistent and often outside of personal control. People's opinions change, Circumstances shift, and what is praised in one moment may be ignored in the next. Relying on that cycle can make progress slower and decisions more stressful. Building confidence in your own reasoning and values doesn't eliminate the need for feedback, but it places it in the right position, supportive rather than decisive. Using validation as a supplement rather than a requirement allows choices to be based on internal clarity first. The mistake of waiting for external validation delays growth and keeps progress dependent on factors that can never be fully controlled. Forgetting to check in on people you care about. Daily routines often become so packed with work, errands, and personal responsibilities that it's easy to lose track of staying connected with the people who matter most. Forgetting to check in on friends or family is a common mistake, and while it might feel small in the moment, it can gradually weaken important relationships. At its core, checking in is simply the act of reaching out, whether through a quick call, a short message, or arranging time to meet. It doesn't require long conversations or grand gestures. What it signals is attentiveness, a reminder that someone is not forgotten, even in the middle of a busy life. When this step is skipped repeatedly, others may begin to feel distant, undervalued, or unsure of where they stand in the relationship. The impact can be seen in everyday examples. A sibling might quietly hope for a call that never comes. A friend going through stress may feel isolated when no one asks how they're doing. Even in strong relationships, long stretches of silence can slowly erode closeness. These situations aren't always the result of intentional neglect. Often, they come from assuming there will always be more time to reconnect later. Over time, neglecting these small moments of contact can lead to bigger gaps. People move on, priorities shift, and relationships that once felt strong may no longer have the same sense of ease or trust. Repairing that distance later is often harder than maintaining steady communication in the first place. A simple message, a brief call, or a few minutes spent asking how someone is doing can be enough to maintain connection. Forgetting to check in on the people you care about is a mistake that slowly undermines relationships that rely on consistent attention to stay strong. Thinking forgiveness excuses bad behavior. In everyday life, forgiveness is often seen as a healthy way to move on from conflict. But a common mistake happens when forgiveness is treated as permission for someone to continue harmful behavior. Forgiving someone does not erase responsibility, nor does it mean their actions are acceptable. At its simplest, forgiveness is about letting go of the anger or resentment that comes from being wronged. It can help the person who forgives feel lighter and less burdened. But if forgiveness is misunderstood as excusing bad behavior, it can create patterns where the same mistakes or mistreatment are repeated without consequence. Instead of resolving the issue, it allows it to continue unchecked. Think about a workplace example. If a colleague constantly takes credit for another person's ideas and each time receives forgiveness without accountability, the behavior is likely to persist. Or consider a personal relationship where one person repeatedly ignores agreed boundaries. If forgiveness is given but nothing changes, the boundary is effectively dismissed. In both cases, the problem doesn't disappear, it deepens. The key distinction is that forgiveness deals with emotions, while accountability deals with actions. Someone can be forgiven without having their behavior overlooked. Clear boundaries, conversations, or consequences are often needed to ensure that the same behavior doesn't happen again. Without this step, forgiveness can unintentionally reward harmful patterns rather than encourage change. Recognizing this mistake is important because it helps separate compassion from tolerance of ongoing harm. Forgiveness can heal emotional wounds, but it doesn't remove the need for responsibility. Thinking forgiveness excuses bad behavior is a misunderstanding that leaves problems unresolved instead of truly addressed. Not balancing logic with intuition. Everyday decisions often pull us between careful reasoning and a gut feeling. Relying only on one side can lead to mistakes because both logic and intuition serve different but equally valuable purposes. Logic is the process of weighing evidence, comparing options, and analyzing outcomes step by step. It works well for structured decisions, like planning a monthly budget, comparing phone plans, or deciding which route to take based on traffic data. Intuition, on the other hand, is the sense that comes from past experience and subtle patterns the mind picks up without conscious effort. It can be useful in situations where there isn't enough time or data to fully analyze, such as quickly sensing a friend is upset, even though they haven't said anything. The mistake happens when one is used without the other. Someone who relies only on logic might spend weeks researching every possible detail before making a simple choice, missing opportunities because they never trusted their instincts. On the other side, relying only on intuition can lead to decisions that feel right in the moment but ignore important facts, like investing in something because it feels promising, without checking whether the numbers add up. Everyday examples make this clear. Choosing a job involves logic in comparing salary, location, and growth opportunities, but intuition helps in sensing whether the work environment feels supportive. Building relationships often requires the same mix: logical awareness of shared values alongside intuitive trust in how the other person makes you feel. Balancing both approaches means letting logic check the details while intuition adds human context. Neglecting one in favor of the other often creates blind spots that lead to avoidable mistakes. Letting fear of embarrassment hold you back. Everyone has experienced moments where they wanted to try something but stopped because of how it might look to others. This hesitation, rooted in the fear of embarrassment, can quietly shape the choices people make and limit opportunities for growth. Embarrassment is a social emotion. It comes from imagining how others will judge a mistake, an awkward attempt, or a visible failure. On a small scale, it might keep someone from asking a question in class because they don't want to seem uninformed. In the workplace, it might stop someone from sharing an idea during a meeting, even if the idea has potential. Over time, these small hesitations add up and form a pattern of missed chances. The mistake lies in letting the fear control behavior rather than treating it as just one factor to consider. Avoiding embarrassment feels safer in the moment, but it often creates long-term setbacks. For example, not learning a new skill because the early attempts will look clumsy means never reaching the point of competence. Skipping public speaking opportunities out of discomfort can prevent someone from building confidence that only develops through practice. It's important to note that embarrassment is temporary, while the missed opportunity can have lasting effects. Most observers quickly move on from noticing a small mistake, while the person experiencing it tends to replay the event far longer than anyone else remembers. Recognizing this gap helps put the fear into perspective. Checking the influence of embarrassment means asking whether avoiding the momentary discomfort is worth giving up the potential benefit. In most cases, the long-term reward outweighs the short-term unease. Understanding this balance prevents the mistake of letting fear of embarrassment decide what is possible. Confusing temporary happiness with lasting meaning, buying something new, achieving a quick win, or enjoying a fun evening out often creates a rush of happiness. The mistake happens when these short bursts of pleasure are mistaken for the kind of meaning that sustains someone over time. Temporary happiness usually comes from external rewards or experiences. It feels good in the moment, but it fades quickly. For example, purchasing an expensive gadget can be exciting at first, but within weeks, it blends into daily life. Similarly, scrolling through social media might provide quick entertainment, but rarely leaves a lasting sense of value. These moments are enjoyable, yet they do not provide the deeper sense of purpose people often hope for. Lasting meaning, on the other hand, is built from long-term commitments and values. It comes from investing in relationships, pursuing skills, or contributing to something larger than oneself. These things may not always bring immediate joy. In fact, they often require effort, patience, and even discomfort. For example, raising a child involves stress and hard work, but it provides a profound sense of meaning. Building a career or maintaining close friendships takes time and energy, but the rewards extend far beyond a single moment of happiness. The problem arises when people chase one temporary high after another, expecting it to fill the deeper gap. This can lead to cycles of dissatisfaction, where happiness feels short-lived and the search begins again. Recognizing the difference between what feels good now and what matters in the long run allows for better decisions about where to invest time and energy. Separating short-term happiness from lasting meaning helps avoid the mistake of confusing the two and ensures that life feels not just enjoyable in moments, but fulfilling across years. Forgetting that everything, even life, is temporary. A favorite restaurant closing, a job changing, or a friendship drifting apart are everyday reminders that nothing stays the same forever. The mistake happens when people live as if the circumstances they know will always remain exactly as they are. Forgetting that everything is temporary can lead to taking things for granted. It is easy to assume that the people in your life will always be there, that your health will stay the same, or that the opportunities available today will still be waiting tomorrow. This mindset can cause delays in making important choices or showing appreciation. For instance, someone might postpone visiting family, assuming there will always be another chance, only to realize later that the moment has passed. Even positive experiences lose their impact when permanence is assumed. A stable job or a comfortable routine can feel secure, but markets shift, companies change, and unexpected events can rewrite plans. Ignoring the temporary nature of stability can make transitions harder when they inevitably arrive. At the same time, remembering impermanence is not only about loss, it can also help put challenges into perspective. Stressful days at work, difficult phases in relationships, or financial struggles rarely last forever. Recognizing that these periods will eventually pass makes them easier to manage without being overwhelmed. Life itself is the ultimate example of impermanence. Each person's time is limited, yet the tendency is to act as though it stretches endlessly. Forgetting this can lead to missed chances to prioritize what actually matters, whether that is spending time with loved ones, pursuing meaningful work, or taking care of health. Acknowledging that everything, including life, is temporary allows for clearer priorities and more deliberate choices in the present. Realizing too late that the biggest mistake is not living fully. A typical day often revolves around routines: waking up, going to work, handling responsibilities, and filling the remaining hours with small distractions. This pattern feels safe and familiar, but over time it can create the illusion that life is simply something to manage rather than something to actively experience. The mistake comes when people realize too late that the real loss is not the challenges they faced, but the opportunities they never allowed themselves to pursue. Living fully means engaging with more than just the minimum required to get by. It involves taking chances, building meaningful connections, and making time for experiences that go beyond basic comfort. When people delay travel, hesitate to try something new, or avoid expressing their true feelings, they often do so out of convenience, fear of change, or the belief that there will always be more time later. For example, someone might keep putting off a trip they've always wanted to take or a hobby they've wanted to learn, thinking they can get to it eventually. Years pass and the chance is no longer there. This mistake shows itself most clearly when looking back. People often regret not the things they tried and failed at, but the things they never attempted. Missing out on meaningful relationships, avoiding risks that could have led to growth, or prioritizing routine over adventure can create a deep sense of loss later in life. The core issue is not about constantly seeking excitement, but about making conscious choices that reflect personal values instead of defaulting to what is easiest. By recognizing this, people can avoid reaching the end of a stage in life and realizing that the greatest mistake was not fully engaging with the time they had. Treating children as extensions of yourself instead of individuals. Parents often make daily choices for their children. What they wear, what they eat, what activities they join. In the early years this is necessary, but the mistake begins when this control extends far beyond childhood and treats the child less as a person and more as a reflection of the parent's own identity. When children are seen as extensions of their parents, their achievements and failures become tied to the parent's sense of pride or disappointment. A parent might push a child into a certain career path, encourage hobbies they personally value, or discourage interests they don't understand. For example, a parent who always wanted to be a doctor may pressure their child into medical school, even if the child is passionate about art or engineering. The intention often comes from love and a desire for security, but the effect is that the child's individuality is overlooked. Children in these situations may learn to hide their true preferences or doubt their own instincts because approval feels conditional. Over time, this can lead to frustration, strained relationships, or even a loss of motivation when they realize they are living someone else's version of success. Everyday signs of this mistake can be as simple as dismissing a child's choice of clothing, ignoring their music preferences, or expecting them to act as if they were an adult replica of the parent. The healthier approach is recognizing that children are separate people with their own strengths, weaknesses, and aspirations. Parents can guide, support, and protect, but they cannot rightfully shape another person's identity to match their own. Treating children as individuals allows them to grow with confidence and independence, while avoiding one of the most common but preventable mistakes in raising the next generation. Allowing resentment to quietly shape your personality over time. It's common to carry small frustrations from everyday life, being overlooked at work, feeling taken for granted at home, or remembering an unfair comment from years ago. The mistake comes when these frustrations aren't addressed and instead settle into long-term resentment that slowly alters how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. Resentment builds quietly. At first, it may seem like irritation or disappointment. Someone might avoid speaking up during a conflict to keep the peace, or they may hold back honest feelings because they don't want to upset others. Over time, these unresolved moments stack up. The person begins to feel that their needs or boundaries don't matter, and this shapes their responses in ways they may not notice. They might become more withdrawn, more critical, or quicker to assume the worst about others. For example, An employee who repeatedly feels overlooked for promotions may begin to disengage from their work. A partner who feels their efforts at home are unappreciated may stop showing the same level of care. Even friendships can erode if one side feels they are always giving more than they receive. In each case, the resentment doesn't just affect how the person views the situation. It reshapes how they view themselves and others, influencing their overall personality. The problem with allowing resentment to guide behavior is that it becomes self-reinforcing. Small slights feel larger, trust weakens, and opportunities for genuine connection are lost. What begins as a reaction to specific events eventually turns into a habitual outlook. Addressing resentment early, through honest conversations, setting boundaries, or even shifting expectations, helps prevent it from becoming a long-term trait. Recognizing it as a hidden force shaping personality is key to avoiding one of the most subtle but damaging mistakes in life. Failing to learn importance of communicating clearly. Clear communication affects nearly every part of daily life, from workplace meetings to conversations at home. When people fail to learn how to express themselves in a straightforward way, misunderstandings multiply and unnecessary conflicts appear. What could have been solved with a short, clear explanation often turns into frustration for both sides. The importance of clear communication begins with the basics, making sure your message matches your intent. If someone asks for help on a project and you respond vaguely, they may not know what you actually agreed to. If a friend shares a concern and your reply is unclear, they may feel dismissed, even if that wasn't your intention. Over time, unclear exchanges build patterns where trust and cooperation weaken. At work, the effects are especially visible. An unclear email can cause an entire team to head in the wrong direction. Instructions that are too broad may leave others guessing, wasting time and effort. At home, saying "I'll handle it later" without specifics can lead to disappointment when expectations differ. These are not just small inconveniences. They change how reliable and dependable people believe you are. Learning to communicate clearly doesn't mean speaking more, but speaking with purpose. It means organizing your thoughts before explaining them, using simple language, and checking that the other person understands. For example, instead of saying soon, give a time frame. Instead of hinting at frustration, state what needs to change. These small adjustments prevent confusion and reduce unnecessary tension. The mistake of neglecting clear communication is that it slowly limits opportunities, weakens relationships, and creates avoidable stress. Developing this skill early makes personal and professional interactions smoother, more efficient, and far more constructive. Thinking talent matters more than persistence and discipline. People often admire someone who seems naturally gifted, whether it's the student who grasps math quickly or the co-worker who can present confidently without much preparation. But one of the most common mistakes is assuming that talent alone guarantees success, while persistence and discipline take a back seat. Talent may provide an initial advantage, but without consistent effort, it rarely leads to lasting achievement. Think about sports. A young player might have natural speed or coordination, but the athletes who reach professional levels are the ones who train daily, follow routines, and stick to disciplined practice even when motivation fades. The same is true in academics or careers. A person who appears naturally skilled at writing or design won't progress far if they avoid the hard work of refining their skills, meeting deadlines, and learning from feedback. Discipline creates progress through repetition. Waking up early to study, practicing a craft for hours, or staying consistent with small tasks each day builds competence in ways talent alone cannot. Persistence adds the ability to keep going when setbacks happen. Someone with talent may give up quickly when challenged, while someone with persistence continues until they improve. Over time, the persistent individual usually surpasses the naturally talented person who relied only on their early advantage. You can see this in workplaces too. Employees who show up consistently, follow through on commitments, and learn steadily tend to move ahead, even if they started with fewer natural strengths than others. Their reliability and work ethic earn trust, while talent without discipline can easily appear unreliable. Believing talent matters more than persistence and discipline causes people to stop trying when they don't feel naturally gifted. In reality, it's the steady combination of persistence and disciplined effort that builds long-term success. Ignoring mental health for too long. It's easy to notice when your body feels off, like a persistent cough or a sore muscle, but the same attention isn't always given to the mind. Ignoring mental health for too long is a mistake that quietly builds over time and often shows up only when daily life starts to feel harder than it should. Mental health includes how you handle stress, interact with others, and make decisions. When neglected, small issues can gradually turn into larger problems. For example, someone under constant pressure at work might brush off their exhaustion as normal, convincing themselves that rest can wait. Over weeks or months, that stress can shift into anxiety, irritability, or burnout. What started as manageable pressure now affects productivity, relationships, and even physical health. A common reason people ignore mental health is that the signs don't always look serious at first. Difficulty sleeping, changes in appetite, or losing interest in activities might be dismissed as temporary phases, yet these are often early signals that the mind needs care. Just as untreated physical injuries can worsen, unaddressed mental strain tends to compound. Support can take many forms. Setting aside regular time to rest, talking with friends or family, practicing stress management, or seeking professional help when needed. These steps are not about weakness, but about maintaining balance, the same way exercise or healthy eating maintain physical health. Workplaces, families, and communities increasingly recognize that well-being depends on mental health just as much as physical health. Still, individuals often wait until they are overwhelmed before addressing it. The longer mental health is ignored, the more difficult it becomes to restore stability, which is why acknowledging and addressing it early is one of the most important choices a person can make. Relying on memory instead of building reliable systems for your life. Forgetting a bill deadline, misplacing important documents, or overlooking a small but necessary task can happen to anyone, and it usually comes from relying too heavily on memory. The human brain is not designed to track dozens of daily obligations with perfect accuracy, yet many people treat memory as their only system. This often leads to missed opportunities, unnecessary stress, and the feeling of being constantly behind. Relying solely on memory means depending on recall in the moment, which is easily disrupted by distractions, fatigue, or unexpected events. For example, someone might remember to buy groceries on the way home, but forget once a phone call interrupts their routine. What feels like a small oversight quickly turns into wasted time and extra frustration. Building reliable systems solves this problem by shifting responsibility from memory to external tools and habits. Systems can be as simple as setting calendar reminders for recurring payments, using a checklist for packing before travel, or organizing important files in one clearly labeled place. These structures don't just prevent mistakes, they free up mental energy for more important decisions. Consider a student who keeps every assignment deadline in their head compared to one who uses a planner. The first may constantly feel anxious about forgetting something, while the second can focus on doing the work rather than keeping track of when it's due. Similarly, professionals who document processes and create clear schedules reduce the risk of errors and make it easier to handle busy days. The difference between struggling to keep up and feeling in control often comes down to whether systems are in place. Depending on memory alone is unreliable, while systems create stability and allow life to run more smoothly even when things get hectic. Underestimating how much environment shapes your habits and mindset. The people you spend time with, the spaces you live in, and even the small cues around you quietly shape your daily habits more than most realize. Environment is not just the physical setting, but the collection of signals, routines, and influences that guide behavior without conscious effort. Ignoring this influence often leads people to blame themselves for poor habits when the environment is actually reinforcing them. For example, a kitchen counter stacked with snacks makes it far more likely that someone will eat mindlessly, while a counter with fruit and water invites healthier choices without requiring extra willpower. In the same way, working in a cluttered space filled with distractions can make focus harder, no matter how disciplined someone tries to be. The setup of the environment is silently pushing behavior in one direction or another. Social settings also play a major role. Spending time with friends who prioritize fitness makes exercise feel normal, while being in a group where unhealthy habits are common can make change much harder. These patterns often happen automatically because people adapt to fit the culture of their surroundings. The environment doesn't just influence small actions, it shapes mindset over time. Constant exposure to negativity at work, for instance, can make someone more cynical, while being in a supportive setting encourages optimism and resilience. Recognizing this link explains why some people thrive after making a change of surroundings, like moving cities, switching workplaces, or even rearranging a home to better fit their goals. The key insight is that environment sets the default path for behavior and thinking. Underestimating its role leads to unnecessary struggle, while designing it carefully makes positive habits and healthy mindsets much easier to maintain. Not preparing children for the realities of the world. Children grow up in environments where adults often shield them from discomfort, but eventually they will face a world that does not adjust itself to their needs. One of the biggest mistakes parents can make is protecting children so much that they fail to prepare them for the realities of life outside the home. The intention usually comes from care and love, but the outcome can leave young people unprepared for challenges that are unavoidable. At its core, preparation means teaching children how to handle responsibility, setbacks, and independence. A child who never helps with basic household tasks may grow up struggling to manage simple routines on their own. Similarly, a teenager who is never allowed to face disappointment might lack the coping skills needed when rejection comes later, whether in academics, work, or relationships. Shielding them from every difficulty feels protective in the short term, but leaves them unequipped in the long run. Practical preparation also matters. Explaining how money works, showing them how to budget, or letting them make small financial decisions gives them experience before the stakes are high. Introducing them to real-world problem solving, like handling conflict with peers or making decisions without constant guidance, builds confidence that lectures alone cannot provide. Even conversations about failure, stress, and effort help children form realistic expectations about how life works. The modern world adds more complexity, from navigating technology to balancing social pressures, and these areas require guidance as well. Parents who avoid these topics may think they are protecting their children, but avoidance often means leaving them to learn from less reliable sources. Preparing children is less about removing obstacles and more about giving them the skills, habits, and mindset to deal with them effectively. Without that preparation, the first serious challenge they encounter often feels overwhelming. Not defining what enough means and endlessly chasing more. Many people spend their lives working harder and reaching for more without ever pausing to decide what enough actually looks like for them. This mistake leaves goals open-ended and makes satisfaction difficult to achieve. Without a clear definition, the target keeps shifting and progress never feels complete. At the most basic level, this happens with money. Someone sets out to earn a good salary, but once they reach it, the goalposts move. The car that once felt like a dream suddenly looks ordinary compared to the next upgrade. The house that seemed perfect starts to feel small when compared with a neighbor's. The cycle repeats, and the feeling of almost there becomes permanent. It also applies to time and achievement. A person might decide they will relax once a project is finished, but by the time it ends, a new task has already filled the space. Or they might plan to take a break after reaching a milestone at work, yet when it arrives, another milestone quickly takes its place. In both cases, rest is postponed indefinitely because enough was never defined. Everyday examples show how this plays out. Someone scrolling through social media might believe they need more possessions, more travel experiences, or more recognition to catch up with others. Yet the comparison never ends because there is always someone with more. Defining what enough means creates a reference point for contentment. It could be a certain level of income that covers needs comfortably, a work schedule that leaves time for family, or a personal standard of health and fitness that feels sustainable. Without this clarity, the chase for more continues without limit. The mistake lies in never setting that boundary, which makes satisfaction impossible to reach. Staying uninformed about how laws and policies affect your life. Everyday routines like working a job, paying bills, or even buying groceries are shaped more than most people realize by laws and policies. Choosing to stay uninformed about how these rules work is a mistake that often leads to surprise, frustration, or missed opportunities. At the most basic level, laws set the boundaries for daily life. They decide how much tax is taken from each paycheck, what benefits are available, and even the price of essential goods through subsidies and regulations. Policies influence whether healthcare is affordable, what rights workers have in their workplace, or how safe a neighborhood feels depending on local rules around housing and policing. Ignoring these factors doesn't mean they stop affecting you. It simply means they remain invisible until a problem arises. Consider a simple example: renting an apartment. Tenant laws determine whether a landlord can raise the rent suddenly, how much notice they must give, and what protections exist if repairs aren't made. Someone who never learns these rules might assume they have no power in these situations, when in fact, legal protections could already exist. Employment is another clear area. Labour laws regulate overtime pay, workplace safety, and leave policies. A person who never looks into these details may miss out on benefits they're legally entitled to, or fail to notice when their rights are overlooked. Even everyday purchases are affected. Food labels, product safety, and consumer protections are all built on policies created behind the scenes. Whether someone chooses to pay attention or not, The rules still shape what ends up on the shelf and how much it costs. Being aware of how laws and policies influence daily life makes it possible to make informed choices and avoid being caught off guard. Avoiding seeking mentorship. Starting something new often feels easier when you try to figure it out alone, but this can quickly become a limiting path. One of the most common mistakes people make is avoiding mentorship, even when guidance could save years of trial and error. A mentor is simply someone with more experience in the area you are trying to grow. They have already faced the problems you are likely to encounter, and they know what works and what does not. By refusing to seek mentorship, people end up repeating the same mistakes that others have already solved. For example, someone starting a small business might struggle for months with basic decisions like pricing or marketing, when an experienced shop owner could have offered clear advice in a single conversation. Mentorship is not limited to careers. It applies to personal development, health, and even hobbies. An athlete training without a coach may overtrain or use poor technique, while one guided by someone more experienced learns safer and faster. Similarly, a student preparing for competitive exams might waste time on ineffective study methods until a mentor introduces a proven approach. Many people avoid mentorship because they believe they should solve everything independently, or they assume asking for help is a sign of weakness. In practice, seeking guidance shows efficiency and awareness. A mentor does not eliminate effort, but they reduce unnecessary obstacles, allowing you to focus energy on meaningful progress rather than preventable mistakes. The impact of mentorship often comes down to perspective. Someone with years of experience can see patterns that a beginner cannot, pointing out shortcuts and opportunities that would otherwise be overlooked. Avoiding this resource slows growth, while seeking it can accelerate both skills and confidence. Recognizing the value of mentorship is an important step toward making progress with fewer setbacks. Forgetting that attention is a limited resource. Every day you only have a certain amount of attention to give, yet most people act as if it is limitless. Attention is the mental energy you use to focus, decide, and process information. Once it is spent, your ability to think clearly and make sound choices declines. Forgetting this simple fact leads to wasted hours, poor decisions, and unnecessary stress. Consider how often attention is pulled in different directions. Checking notifications while working, half listening to a meeting while scrolling, or juggling multiple small tasks all compete for the same limited resource. Each switch drains focus, leaving less capacity for tasks that truly matter. By evening, even simple choices like what to eat for dinner feel harder, not because the options are difficult, but because attention has already been used up throughout the day. This mistake also shows up in larger decisions. People often commit to too many responsibilities, underestimating how much focus each one requires. A student may sign up for extra courses, a professional may accept additional projects, or a parent may overcommit to community activities. In each case, spreading attention too thin reduces the quality of effort everywhere, even when the intentions are good. Protecting attention begins with recognizing it as finite. Just like budgeting money, you can budget focus. This means reserving attention for tasks that align with priorities, reducing constant interruptions, and being selective about what deserves mental effort. Small adjustments like silencing notifications or blocking time for focused work can make a noticeable difference. The reality is that attention cannot be stretched without cost. Treating it as unlimited leads to fatigue and reduced effectiveness, while managing it carefully ensures that energy goes where it matters most. Remembering this helps you get more from each day with less unnecessary strain. Believing fairness is guaranteed in life instead of learning resilience. Life does not always reward effort in equal measure, yet many people grow up believing that fairness is automatic. This assumption can make ordinary setbacks feel unbearable because the expectation was that doing the right thing would always lead to the right result. In daily life, the gap between effort and outcome appears often. A student might prepare thoroughly for an exam, only to face tricky questions that do not reflect their preparation. An employee may work longer hours than peers, but still be overlooked for promotion due to office politics or timing. Even in personal relationships, someone can invest care and energy, yet encounter conflict or disappointment. When people expect fairness to be guaranteed, these moments feel like violations rather than challenges. The problem with this mindset is that it leaves little room for adaptability. If every obstacle is seen as unfair, frustration builds, and energy that could be used to adjust or try again is instead spent on resentment. This reaction makes it harder to keep moving forward when things do not go as planned. Learning resilience offers a more practical path. Resilience is the capacity to recover from difficulties, to see setbacks as part of the process rather than proof of injustice. It involves shifting focus from what should have happened to what can be done next. For example, a rejected job application becomes an opportunity to refine skills or improve the approach. A personal disagreement becomes a lesson in communication rather than a permanent loss. Accepting that fairness is not always present does not mean giving up on justice or effort. It means recognizing that outcomes are influenced by many factors beyond control. Building resilience ensures that progress continues despite these realities, making it possible to handle life's uneven ground with stability and persistence. Ignoring how history shapes the present and repeating old mistakes. Everyday life is filled with routines, habits, and systems that were shaped long before today. Yet many people overlook how history directly influences the present, and as a result, they fall into the trap of repeating old mistakes. At the most basic level, history is not just about wars, leaders, or distant events. It is about patterns of behavior, decisions, and consequences that accumulate over time. For example, financial crises often follow familiar paths: risky borrowing, overconfidence, and eventual collapse. When people ignore how similar cycles have unfolded in the past, they are caught off guard when the same mistakes resurface. This same principle applies on a personal level. A person who repeatedly overspends, ignoring past experiences of debt, is repeating a small-scale version of historical patterns. A workplace that resists change because things have always been done this way risks falling behind competitors, just as industries that ignored technological shifts lost relevance in earlier decades. Understanding history helps identify warning signs and adapt more effectively. Public health campaigns today, for instance, draw on past outbreaks to prevent mistakes in managing new ones. Civil rights progress is studied to recognize both successes and setbacks, guiding present efforts toward equality. Even family traditions or personal choices carry lessons from what worked or failed before. The mistake lies in assuming that the present is completely new and detached from what came before. Without acknowledging how earlier actions set the stage, individuals and societies are more likely to recycle failures instead of building on lessons. Recognizing how history shapes today provides a practical advantage. It allows people to connect past outcomes with current decisions and avoid falling into predictable traps that have already been experienced before. Treating kindness as weakness instead of strength. In daily life, people often hesitate to show kindness because they fear it will be seen as weakness. This belief is a common mistake because kindness is not the absence of strength. It is a deliberate choice that requires it. At its core, kindness is the act of treating others with respect, patience, or generosity, even when there is no immediate benefit. Many confuse this with being passive or easy to take advantage of. For example, someone who forgives a colleague's mistake at work may be viewed as soft, when in reality, they are showing restraint and prioritizing long-term cooperation over short-term frustration. Kindness also requires control over one's own emotions. It is easier to respond with anger when insulted, but it takes more discipline to respond calmly. A person who offers help to someone in need, despite being busy themselves, demonstrates the ability to manage their own priorities while recognizing the value of empathy. This is not weakness but strength in decision-making. On a broader level, leaders who use kindness as part of their approach often build stronger teams and healthier environments. A manager who listens and supports their employees is not giving up authority, but reinforcing trust that leads to better results. Parents who show consistent kindness provide stability, which helps children grow with confidence. The misconception arises because kindness does not always display itself loudly. Unlike aggression, it is subtle, and subtlety is often misread as lack of power. But behind every act of kindness is a conscious decision, a level of self-control, and an understanding that strength is not always about domination. Treating kindness as weakness overlooks the discipline and clarity it demands, and recognizing it as strength allows it to become a more effective tool in daily life. Failing to question traditions that no longer serve their purpose. Many routines in daily life come from habits passed down through families, workplaces, or communities. While some traditions add meaning and stability, the mistake arises when people continue following them without asking whether they still serve a useful purpose. Traditions often begin with practical reasons. A rule in a household, such as everyone eating dinner at a specific hour, may have once ensured togetherness. Over time, even if schedules change and family members are rarely free at the same time, the practice may continue simply because it has always been done this way. At that point, the tradition may cause stress instead of fostering connection. The same pattern shows up in schools, workplaces, or cultural events. Certain teaching methods, office rules, or ceremonies may once have solved real problems, but may no longer fit present circumstances. For example, companies that require strict dress codes in environments where clients never visit may be maintaining appearances at the expense of comfort and productivity. Cultural practices, too, can hold value, but when they begin limiting progress or placing unnecessary burdens on people, questioning them becomes essential. Failing to evaluate traditions can create two major problems. First, it can waste time and energy on activities that no longer provide benefits. Second, it can prevent better solutions from emerging. In contrast, questioning traditions does not mean rejecting them outright. It means examining whether they meet today's needs and keeping them when they add value. When people balance respect for history with the willingness to adapt, traditions remain meaningful instead of becoming obstacles. The real mistake is assuming that every long-standing practice must be preserved, rather than asking whether it still improves life in the present. Living without ever defining your own principles, everyday choices, from how you spend your money to how you treat others, are easier when guided by clear personal principles. The mistake comes when people move through life without ever deciding what those principles are, leaving their decisions to be shaped entirely by circumstances or the opinions of others. Principles are simply the standards you choose to live by. They don't need to be complicated or lofty. For example, someone might decide that honesty, reliability, and fairness are non-negotiable values. Once defined, these principles serve as a reference point when life presents difficult choices. Without them, decisions often become inconsistent, swayed by convenience, pressure, or short-term gain. Consider a workplace situation. If you've never clarified where you stand on fairness, you might go along with an unfair policy simply to avoid conflict. On the other hand, if fairness is a principle you've committed to, you're more likely to speak up or look for a better solution. The same applies in personal relationships. Without clear boundaries, it's easy to say yes to things that don't align with who you want to be, only to regret it later. Principles provide a structure that reduces this uncertainty. Living without defined principles also creates long-term risks. It can lead to feeling directionless, easily influenced, or caught in patterns that conflict with what you actually value. In contrast, people who take the time to define their principles often experience more consistency in their decisions, even when circumstances change. Defining principles is less about making life rigid and more about setting a foundation that makes choices clearer and behavior more aligned with what matters most. Ignoring this step is a mistake that leaves direction up to chance instead of personal conviction. Confusing information with wisdom. Everyday life is filled with easy access to information. You can look up how to cook a recipe, manage your finances, or even solve a household problem in seconds. But having access to endless information is not the same as having wisdom, and treating the two as equal is a mistake many people make. Information is simply facts, data, or instructions. It tells you what something is or how it works. Wisdom, on the other hand, is the ability to interpret that information, judge when and how to use it, and understand its consequences in real life. Without that distinction, people often assume that knowing a fact is the same as knowing what to do with it. Consider someone learning about health online. They may read dozens of articles about diets and exercise routines, but if they lack the wisdom to evaluate which approach fits their lifestyle, health needs, and long-term sustainability, the information alone won't help. Another example is in decision-making at work. A person might gather statistics and reports, but without the judgment to prioritize what really matters, decisions can end up ineffective. Wisdom often comes from experience, reflection, and applying knowledge in practical contexts. It's why advice from someone who has lived through a challenge often feels more useful than a quick internet search. The internet can give you the tools, but only practice and careful thought turn those tools into reliable skills. The mistake of confusing information with wisdom leads to overconfidence, shallow understanding, or reliance on memorized facts without the ability to adapt them. Recognizing the difference allows you to use information as raw material, while building wisdom through experience, evaluation, and thoughtful application. This distinction makes learning meaningful and decisions more effective.